Small pod and no cast makes Jack a dull boy.
Does he say that out loud?
No.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's
not
typed.
even a line.
It's typed. It's visually depicted on screen. It is, in fact, never said out loud.
This movie has like a lot of famous quotes.
Yeah.
You know, here's Johnny. That's really another quote.
Podcast backwards is...
Oh.
Ooh,
no, wait, yeah. All right, TSACDOP. Sacked up.
Sacked up.
Yeah,
Jacked up.
that works. You can talk. Please talk.
Please talk.
I
Save
have a
us from
friend
this.
who you can say a sentence to,
And he can just
He can do it
that.
and he'll do that. He'll do like that mental math for a
Yeah.
second, and then say it backwards, and then he'll,
He
I
can
don't
do
know.
a sentence. He can like
Oh yeah,
not just
he
a
can do
word.
a full sentence.
Wow.
Friend sounds weird.
Well, we're not like close.
Okay.
Close.
Right.
He's more of like a friend of a friend. I can't speak to what he's like. I mean, I feel like maybe I overstated it.
Yeah.
You just saw this guy at a circus.
Yeah.
Like, it's my friend.
You guys ever heard of?
By the way, what's the
Barnum
guy
and
who was a
Bailey?
chicken? Spell the words backwards by pecking. Hello, Danny. Come and podcast with us.
There you go.
Right, there you go.
Forever and
Come and
ever.
podcast
Yeah.
with us forever and ever. Yeah.
That's a classic.
That's a classic. This movie, here's the thing I'll say about this movie. A lot of iconic elements.
Yeah, right. Sure.
It is pretty wild rewatching this and just going like, oh, pretty much every single thing in this film is iconic. There are a few films that I feel like are this thoroughly seeped into the culture.
The fucking
Yes.
rugs are iconic.
That's the thing. Even if you've never seen this movie before, this is absolutely a movie that you absorb by cultural osmosis, where it's like the lines, the looks,
Okay.
the movements, the art direction, the costumes.
Even things like I did not see this movie until I think I was like sort of much older, but
Mhm.
had soaked so much of it in through osmosis, like
Yeah.
you're talking about. Even like red rum,
Yes.
you would think would be a massive part of this movie, but
Right.
it's really just something that comes up and is dealt with in.
It's just something that sort of gives you a jolt, and that's that.
Yeah, and that's
Right.
it.
I mean, it's sort of hinted at but right. It's not like one of the million things I love about this. Like right, it's not like at the end and they have to like put red rum
Right.
into a computer and
Right.
that unlocks a or whatever. Like it's not like this stuff doesn't come together in some way that's like important.
No.
Nor
No,
needed.
But even the imagery of like the Grady twins is another thing where you're like, how can this one movie contain all of these elements? And you watch it and you're like, because anything that happens in this movie that is on screen for more than 3 seconds somehow
Okay.
became indelible.
But can I say something? I agree
Yes.
with everything you're saying. And yet, it's also a movie with kind of like 45 minutes of slow setup that's not particularly spooky and is a lot of conversation.
Yeah.
And like and that's fine. I love
Yeah.
it all. But
you know
like,
what makes it spooky though?
What?
If you just put on dramatic strings.
Sure,
There's
no,
that.
I know. But
It's
like,
also one of these movies where somehow the pacing is in and of itself scary. Where even when you're in the 45 minutes, it's like he edited this film with like the weirdest rhythms of like
Yeah.
too much air in between lines.
God, I
Where
love
the
that.
whole thing from moment one is just like, why won't this movie speed up?
There is that thing like if you had never seen The Shining,
Mhm.
if you're a person who's never seen it but lives in this world, you would think, oh, like, well, what I know about that movie is it is the scariest thing I'm ever going to see.
Yes.
And when it comes down to it, only one person like gets killed.
The entire
The
film.
entire movie, one person. I mean, like other
Yeah,
people
no.
in the story die.
Yeah, like there have been deaths.
And there have been deaths.
But there's only one murder.
There's only
and
one,
then
like-
Jack is murdered by the weather.
Yeah,
Sure.
So I guess I don't know.
The
put
ultimate
the weather
serial
on
killer in
trial.
many ways.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, this movie is 2 years after Halloween, which is a film that really kind of rewrites the rules of like, oh, you can kill everybody in a movie.
Halloween only has like 4 murders, though. People just were, people were satisfied with a murder or 2 back then.
Sure.
They didn't need,
That just, I think, yeah.
20 deaths a second.
But flash forward, I mean, I am as much a part of the problem because when I went to go see the Meg,
Mm.
I was like,
Yeah,
There are-
not enough kills. Like,
there are not nearly
right.
enough.
That's all you got?
how many kills are there?
You go
in the
like,
Meg?
that's all you got?
That's all you got. You
Right.
got the Meg, and there are only going to
Right.
be like 5 or 6 people.
I
This
saw
is
the Meg
5
on a
years after
plane.
Jaws. Jaws is one of those movies also where it like feels like there are more deaths than there are.
It's really just the lady, the couple at the beginning, the kid,
Right.
Robert Shaw. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
Is that it? Is that everyone who dies
Maybe.
in Jaws?
Maybe. It's maybe
Am I
4
forgetting
people.
someone?
But same what you're saying, like Halloween, only 4 people, but I think especially at that time it was just like 4 felt like a lot. And those movies have this pervasive sense of like, fuck, anyone's at risk.
I rate movies by how many
Everyone.
deaths.
Of course.
So 2 out of 10 for The Shining.
You give it 2 bloody knives.
2 out of 10.
It is funny what you're saying because I feel like this movie was Hitchcock saying, I wanna try my hand at horror, and
Hitchcock.
my goal is Kubrick.
Jesus.
Wow.
God.
Is Hitchcock still alive? He's still alive around now, right? He'd be really old.
I thought you were asking now.
No, he's dead now.
He is dead now.
He would be 122, 3 years old now. No, he died in 1980, right before this movie came out. Because he knew it was going to bum him out.
He knew it was going to bum him
He
out.
knew it was going to be, fuck, he beat me.
Yeah.
No. Okay, now.
No, Kubrick's whole thing was like, I need a hit. Let me go to a proven genre. Let me try a horror movie. And the challenge to myself is, can I make the single scariest movie ever made? But it's coming off of the 70s, which were such a like boon time for horror and sort of rewrote the rules of the genre. And you're like, there's all the sort of like build that happens in the 70s prior to this movie. And then there's sort of like the run after this movie where you have like
A lot of slashers and
right,
yeah,
but
yeah,
you know,
right.
you have Jaws, you have Michael Myers, you have Leatherface before this, and then you have Freddy and Jason
Those
after
guys.
this. You know,
Sure.
Chucky.
Chucky.
All it's wild that this movie sort of stands like on its own in this
You are
midpoint
forgetting-
and is so different than everything that comes before and after.
And I would love to talk to Alex about this, actually, thinking about his taxonomy of horror that he did on our Halloween episode,
Yes.
right? About where The Shining falls in that, because The Shining's like Alex's favorite, or well, one of his favorites.
yeah.
Alex Perry, to be clear.
He's a director.
He's been on our show, Alex.
Oh no, I've
No, you know-
listened,
you know who he
I've
is.
listened
Yeah,
to the
yeah, yeah,
Halloween
yeah.
episode. I didn't want to
Right.
like fan out and say how much
Oh,
I
you can
enjoyed
fan.
it. Like I loved it.
It's good, but right, like because like obviously The Exorcist,
Yeah.
which is what like 6,
70
7 years before the
Yeah.
73, right? Exorcist. Yeah, 73.
Okay.
That's a similar thing where it's like prestige horror with major
Yes.
actors based on a bestseller
Right.
that's going to be a little different in how you sell it versus like a Halloween or like a Texas Chainsaw, right? Like I assume that's what The Shining's going for in every way of like this is based on a book.
Mhm.
Yes, it's terrifying. Don't bring your kids,
Right.
but like you're not going to see this with a bunch of teenagers who are throwing popcorn at like this is a serious adult movie.
Here's like the biggest leading man.
Biggest leading man, one of the most famous directors of all time at this point.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Like
Right.
he's only got 2 movies left
And
in his
King
career.
has already sort of proven himself to be the guy, at least the guy of the decade at this point. Like,
Yeah, King is kind of the guy of the decade, and he was chill at the time about
Right.
this movie. Like he only gripes
later.
as it goes on, right?
Right.
But like yeah. Where's King actually? Oh, there's a lot to talk about. God, I'm getting
Look,
Wait,
this is a
wait. Can I ask
Wait,
this question?
ask
Because
it.
I didn't. I sort of intentionally didn't look into a lot of the history of
Mhm.
it. But was this calculated in that way? I guess related to what we're talking about. That this movie almost seems like it exists out of time. If you had asked me if this came out before Halloween or after,
Yeah.
I would have said it came out 15 years before
Right,
Halloween. It
right.
seems like it does not
It doesn't
exist.
seem like part of a trend or anything.
It doesn't.
Like
It
that,
No,
seems like
'cause-
completely
Which probably
separate from that.
there was a
True.
trend. There's a trend. There's an escalation. There's sort of an evolution of the genre that feels like it is not interrupted by this movie, but this movie exists out of line with it.
Yes.
And as impactful as this movie is, it doesn't affect any other movies afterwards.
Yes, and that's what I'm
sort of.
wondering. Was this
Yeah.
calculated by anyone? Like exactly what you're saying of it's the biggest movie star with one of the best directors. Everybody's already established.
Yeah.
So was this calculated to be this sort of prestige horror?
I think so.
A little bit. Here's what I'll say though. This is the second Stephen King film adaptation. There
Right.
had only been one before this, which is Carrie.
And this was only his third published book.
Third or fourth, like very
It's
early in
Carrie,
his
Salem's
career.
Lot, Shining.
Right, because then the book's only like 3 years old. It's in
Right.
77. But so like after The Shining comes the real 80s wave
Right.
of like lots of King stuff.
Yeah.
So that would be the trend you could point to, not so much a Stanley Kubrick thing, more of just like this established along with Carrie, like let's just whatever that fucking guy wrote,
That's
let's put it on screen.
right. That's maybe the point where he becomes like a franchise in and of himself. But at
Franchise
this
in and of
point,
himself.
maybe he's like Dennis Lehane or something, where you're like, oh, this guy gets big adaptations by big directors, you know?
Yeah, it's Cujo, Dead Zone, Christine, Children of the Corn, Firestarter, Stand By Me, The Running Man are the '80s adaptations, and then you also have, and then the ones he actually worked on, which are like Creep Show,
Right.
Cat's Eye, Maximum Overdrive, Pet Cemetery. It's a lot of stuff. And then the Salem's Lot miniseries as well. Like so much stuff.
I wonder if the thing that we're talking about existing sort of, it doesn't really affect any of the movies after. I wonder if the way that this affected movies that came after was, like it always feels like this is a phenomenon of the moment of like just professional point missers. Like everybody in the world seems to be so good at missing the fucking point of everything.
Yeah.
And maybe, and it's like one of the reasons that I don't like being alive at any moment.
Oh, it's terrible.
It's awful.
It's one of the worst things.
But then I'm like, oh, maybe it's okay to be alive because they missed the fucking point back then.
Right.
And the point that they missed was, oh, everybody just needs axe murders. And so like everybody's like, oh, well, we're dumb and we missed the point. So let's just have axe murder movies rather than thinking, why don't you just make the scariest fucking movie of all time that just happens to have one guy get axed?
Right. But
It's hard to make the scariest movie.
It's hard.
of all time.
It's
This
hard.
is my dad called this. Like I remember when I was
Yeah.
a kid, I was like, "What's the scariest movie you've ever seen?" He's like, "The Shining." Like,
Yeah.
I don't think he ever wavered from that.
It
opinion.
is scary from the very first.
This is what I'm saying.
What, the helicopter shot? You don't think that? You think that's super? That looks nice, pretty.
It does. It's
not
pretty, well,
foreboding
it's
at
really
all.
the soundtrack
Yeah,
that
yeah,
does
sure,
it.
I
But
know
I mean,
that.
it's just
And
There's something, yeah,
the
it's just like
scrolling
every
titles.
camera move in this is scary.
Yeah, there's some, like the camera almost makes you feel like you're gonna fall off
Yeah.
the road.
Yes.
Like it's very intentional, I think.
100%. Like because
you
you
think
really
this movie's
need.
intentional?
You think some of the visuals in this film were made with intention?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of thought going into it.
I do
I just
love the
imagine
road.
he's
And
like
I would
Brett
say-
Ratner asleep at the monitor. Sort of
no,
like,
I would say it was.
on his
I would say it was
cell
kind of
phone.
intense too.
You think it's
The
kind of
set
intense.
was a little intense.
I mean, not
Yeah.
to joke. Like the helicopter shot, I'm obsessed with, and I actually watch it all the time. But like, and it's just in your head for the rest of the movie, where you're like, "That's the road you'd have to go down to get out of here." Like,
Yes.
it's so long. You're
Yes.
not at getting out
Right,
of here.
right.
Like,
It's
there's-
upsetting.
It looks hard in the summer.
But can I say something?
Yes, please introduce our show.
This is a podcast called Blank Check with Griffin and David. I'm Griffin.
I'm Dave.
It's a podcast about filmographies, directors who have massive success early on in their careers and are given a series of blank checks to make whatever crazy passion projects they want. Sometimes those checks clear. Sometimes they bounce, baby. Couldn't really commit to Nicholson.
No, even though we've done him so many times on our
I know,
podcast,
and
like he's one of the top ones.
Probably going
right?
to do some ad reads. in this
I
episode.
like it when you put podcast into a quote. I
Sure.
like it when you say sometimes they bounce baby. I don't like it when you mess around with the baby part.
Oh, I hear what you're saying.
You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah.
Because I feel like they're
Right.
yeah.
Right. Because sometimes I'll say like, and sometimes they.
Yeah.
I can't even think of an
Yeah.
example.
Sometimes they get dragged to hell, baby.
Right. You don't like that. Okay.
I
No,
don't like that.
noted.
I'm here as a
No,
listener and as a fan, and
this look,
but also I'm here to
note us.
I have some thoughts.
You have some thoughts. We're dying to hear them. Look, it's a miniseries on the films of Stanley Kubrick. It's called Pod's Widecast, and today a long overdue guest.
Wait, what is it called?
Pod's Widecast.
We're sorry.
Pods. Okay, got it.
Pod's
okay.
Widecast.
Okay.
You
Pod's.
don't need to say okay. You
Why-
can say that's stupid.
Cast.
It's fine.
I think it's good.
I think it's fine. It's what we settled on.
I think it's good.
Yeah.
Our guest today, a dear friend, a gentleman, a scholar, truly a long overdue guest. I feel like in the early days of this pod, I remember very early on when we were like, could we get guests? I was like, I should ask my buddy Tim. And you were like, what's this fucking thing you have? And then some years later, you
Wow.
started listening
Dragging
to the show.
him.
And now I think you feel like, oh, I like harangued my way onto the show. You've spent the last couple of months being like, guys, I don't want you feeling like you have to have me. Am I going to ruin the episode?
I have a couple I wrote down like I took notes. You know, I wanted
Sure.
I wanted to be a good. I
Yeah,
wanted to be a good
yeah. Take
guest.
For
Our guest today, by the way, from Veep, Tim Simons, but also most importantly, I don't know if you know this, Ben, or you put this together. The voice of Butcher Boy, member of Shank's gang in Ralph Breaks the Internet.
Oh fuck!
Yeah.
Dude, hold on. Let me shake your hand.
Oh.
Ben has taken out his headphones.
So nice to meet you.
I don't think I knew
Wow.
Look up Butcher Boy, just to
Yeah,
remind
I
yourself
remember.
what Tim.
Big-
Okay, hold
big,
on.
big,
looks like.
scary guy with a beard.
Yeah, fucking handlebar mustache, right?
Handlebar mustache, but he still has value, even though he crashes in the race.
Absolutely.
I should watch that movie again. I only saw it the one time.
Yeah, it's good.
I remember thinking it was funny. Yeah.
The I wrote down some housekeeping notes that had nothing to do with The Shining, but and only because you brought it up now.
Do it.
I
Read us for fun.
I think I have a lot. I think, like a lot of people,
Mhm.
I thought that this show was, and I love you, Griffin.
I love you too.
I thought that this show
Dear old
was
friends.
a weekly podcast where every week you talked about the movie Blank Check.
Many people thought that.
And every week it
Yeah.
was just that.
and that's the bit. We just never
I'll say this
give
too.
up.
I'll say this
Right,
too.
right.
In your defense, I believe the first time I ever asked you to do the show was in the first year when the premise literally was we only talk about Phantom Menace every week. So I definitely pitched it to you as I have a podcast with my friend and we talk about the Phantom Menace every week. I remember a phone call with you where you called me to say, I'm going to be in New York next week. And I went, oh, great. You should come on my podcast. And you went, I might actually be busy. And I was like, this phone
I
call
don't-
started with you pitching to me that you're in town and would like to see me. And the second I told you Phantom Menace every week, you were like, schedule's going to be
The
tight.
schedule's going to be tight. But here's the thing. I love you.
I love you too.
But the idea of going on something that was Blank Check every single
Of
week
course.
is like a true I ain't reading all that
Yeah,
situation. Like I'm happy for
absolutely.
you, or
Happy
I'm sorry that
for you.
happened,
Right.
but I'm not reading all that.
Yes.
And it was, so I was listening to the LA Film Podcast, which is like a podcast where they only talk about movies that were made or filmed in LA or about Los Angeles, and they talk about how it affected the city, whatever. And they mentioned what your show was about. And I was like, holy shit, that sounds great. I had no idea. I always thought it was this. So that's when I started listening. And yes, and now I am mournful that it has taken this long
Wow.
to
Wow.
be into it.
Well, we all get there in due time.
Thank you for coming on the show, Tim.
Thank you.
This show is very stupid. We're here to
Thank
talk about. Have you seen the movie Blank Check?
No, I never have.
It's not good.
You know, it was written by the man who wrote Save the Cat, right?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
like his
Yeah.
actual
Yes, yes.
hit.
Proof
Like,
is in the
I did
pudding.
know
Here
that.
you go.
and it was,
Perfect
as we
screenplay.
did an episode on it like years ago just to complete the joke.
It's
or whatever.
cool. A woman kind of is like attracted to a boy in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Oh.
true. There is some like boy
Oh, that's
woman
cool.
flirting in it.
Yeah. It's former MTV DJ VJ Duffy. Remember
Duffy.
Duffy?
Yes.
Duffy is in
Sure,
it?
Karen
Dude,
Duffy.
it's like 1994 the movie, like Tone Loc, Duffy.
Yeah. Michael Lerner, fresh off an Oscar nom.
Yeah, Lerner just being like, sure, I'll give you 10 minutes.
Sure.
Like,
Give me that check back.
yeah, right. I got the check.
But Duffy plays this like
one of those walls of cathode ray TVs where it's
Yeah.
like 12 of them, you know, where you're like, this is cool, more TVs. Like, you know. Like,
Duffy like full on kisses a boy, like a child.
yeah, what is he, 10?
Right.
If that.
Right.
The movie
That was the second
stinks.
volume of the volume 1 Save the Cat, volume 2 French the Kid.
Right.
But they know French.
They almost do.
Okay.
Lips are a little
Um,
parted.
But Blank Check, yeah, bad movie.
Bad.
The other housekeeping notes that I
Oh yeah,
have
hit me.
is I just want to point out that the coffee spill
Oh boy.
from the draft day trailer is not in the final cut.
Okay.
No,
The
not remarked
Okay.
on.
Well,
or
look,
we've mentioned.
Here's
maybe.
here's the
yeah,
thing.
not-
Okay,
not-
so
not a lot.
Tim, you and I have been friends now for almost a decade. A crazy thing to consider.
I'm assuming you met on the set of Draft Day.
Yes,
we
That's when
did.
you
on
got
the
to know
set of
each
Draft
other.
Day.
Sure.
Staying at the Homewood Suites outside of
Yes,
Cleveland, Ohio.
Beachwood, Ohio. We were in Beachwood, Ohio.
Yes, and
Right.
We went to Cedar Point together
Yes.
and rode roller coasters.
The largest collection of
Oh, I
roller
know
coasters
Cedar
in
Point.
America.
Did you
Yeah.
you got all the good ones in?
We-
Like that's a
there was the
real
one-
spot.
There was the one that got shut down that I think I kind of didn't want to do anyway.
We both didn't want to
We
do it,
both
and
didn't
we
wanna do it.
really
We weren't
accepted
admitting
the out given to us by
Yes.
mechanical failure.
It was like one of those kind of like ones where it's like it's all wood. Or,
No, it's the one where it's like it goes all the way
All the way
straight
up.
Ugh,
locks you there in that
fuck
position, and then
that.
crazy drop.
and then
Right.
spins you down.
But it's
not.
not as
Right.
long of
Yeah.
a thing.
Same,
it's
same,
just
David.
really the one big drop. And we both were like in line for this for like over an hour. And we're like,
Yep.
we're gonna feel good when we've done this, right?
Yeah,
Like we'll
we're
feel
gonna
good,
feel good when we
an
do it.
hour
And-
from now.
And when they were like, it's broken, it'll be back up in 20 minutes, we were like, we're good.
Yeah, we're good. We're all good. But we went on pretty much everything else. I got a horrible sunburn. But the opening scene, that movie all takes place on a day, the draft day.
That's right.
Famously, it is Draft Day.
And we had already shot a bunch of other scenes. We've been working on the movie for like 3 or 4 weeks.
Right.
And then we went to Cedar Point and I showed up on set and I was bright red and they had to like try to paint me pale on top of.
I always think like they've got like movie magic. They can make me,
No, it looks really bad. It's that one scene. But all this to say, the main big stars in the cast, and we had a very large cast of characters. Main big stars in the cast were all at the nice hotel in downtown Cleveland, Ohio.
Yes.
And everyone else they put in,
The Homewood Suites.
right, in Beachwood, Ohio, a town that is pretty much a series of car dealerships.
Yes.
And the two of us, Wade Williams,
Yeah, Wade Williams was there.
yes. There were a couple other guys.
Wade Williams, I know that guy.
Some Prison Break.
Prison Break guy. Yeah.
Yes.
yeah,
God,
yeah.
he's awesome.
Great
yeah,
guy.
Yeah, yeah.
There were a couple other guys like us who were like in the whole movie, but aren't like the lead characters.
Yeah.
So whereas like someone like Pat Healy would show up and they'd put him in the shitty Beachwood hotel, but he'd only be there for 2 days.
Right. But
We were there for like 6 to 8 weeks.
Yes.
In the shitty Beachwood Hotel?
Yeah, and Tim and I immediately became fast friends. 'cause-
Wade Williams, at one point, he was like, "Hey, come down, I'll cook you steaks," and he like cooked me pan-seared Homewood Suites steaks. It was like the most Wade Williams shit that's
Oh,
ever
really?
happened.
Like in his room, like in his hotel
Yeah,
room, he
in
just
the-
like had a frying pan and
yeah,
was
they've
like,
got like little kitchenettes
Right.
there. You know what I mean?
Was it good?
It was great. I mean, the
Yeah.
man knows how to do it.
that guy rules. He's like one of these like guys, like everything's like that.
I mean, like
that
he
movie-
didn't.
and
he
it's
there wasn't like a green on the side. You know what I mean?
Oh,
It was
Sure,
just like
it's
you're
just
coming
like
down
eat your steak.
Yeah.
You're coming down here for steak.
That movie, as we talked about, like, is the most bananas loaded cast.
That's the thing.
Beyond like the fact that like Chadwick Boseman is in,
Right.
just
Yeah.
like a zillion character actors where
But,
you're
like,
like
fucking like Puff Daddy's in it
Yeah,
and Terry
exactly,
Crews.
fucking
yeah.
That's
you
right.
know, is it? I always forget. Is it Chai or Chi McBride? I
I
forget.
believe it's Chi McBride.
Chi McBride and like
Yeah.
fucking
Sam-
Superman's in it.
Tom Welling. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's right. He's
Sam Elliott's in it.
Right.
Sam Elliott.
We were
He's
just
the
saying
coach,
our
right?
cat. We forgot. Was
Yeah,
in it.
we completely
her parts largely cut out, but yeah.
But
yeah.
like she's in it.
right.
The other little housekeeping note that I want to
Sure.
throw out there is
Brad
that I
Henke?
was present. I was present. I witnessed
Oh, okay.
the
the
Ellen
coffee.
Burstyn thing.
Oh,
Try
you saw
silence.
Try Silence.
He saw-
I saw this happen.
So that's how it went down. It was just an absolute fatality in front of you.
it is
It was like
the
you know,
only word that I
scorpion
can,
like freezing someone and then like punching them into 1,000 pieces or whatever. Yeah, like
it was withering.
Yeah.
It
it
hurt.
sounds withering.
Yeah.
It was. I mean, like I don't know that. I feel like you've done a good job in describing this.
I think
movie.
so, but I can only describe how it felt inside. I can't describe what it felt like to everyone else in a loaded hair and makeup trailer.
Yes,
Like
it
every
lo-
seat filled.
It was the kind of thing where you keep staring straight forward. And
Yeah.
at this point, I know and love Griffin, and we've
Yes.
gone to Cedar Point.
Right.
together.
At this point, we pretty much spent all of our downtime together,
Yes.
and we were in the same van every morning, every night
Uh-huh.
on set. We were like chilling in the corner with each
Yep.
other, like because we were both in this position where it was like, this is weird. This movie we're on.
Yes.
You were a much bigger deal than me. You'd done several seasons of Veep. but
No,
we're
no,
the-
no. I think this was after the. I mean, like the first season had maybe just come out.
I think it was you had just done season 2, but maybe season 1 was the only one that had
Oh
aired.
wait, no, maybe you're right. Yes,
Right?
no, I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
'cause
still-
Veep
Even still,
started in
you hadn't done
12.
many films.
No, no,
We're
no.
with crazy big stars.
And we're in there with like Dennis Leary.
right.
You know, like what are we? You know, there was that one time where Dennis Leary was like, "Everybody's on their phone too much," and I was like, "Fuck, awesome! All right, we're
Yeah,
talking." And
right.
he was like, "Oh, I didn't know." like,
It literally turned into like a
I was about to say,
1992
like,
Leary
I would be
special.
like, tell me, Larry, come on, come on.
yes,
come
I
on,
was started
drag
doing that. I
me."
don't think that he was understanding. He was like, "Oh God, now I got to talk."
Yeah.
God, what I could give, just go to like a coffee place with Leary,
Oh,
and like someone's like, "You want like the maple coffee?" And he's just like, "All right,
Here we go. Let me tell you something."
I'm turning on the flamethrower."
it was truly a like, on set people used to talk to each other. And
Right.
everyone put their
He's like,
phones
"Hey, what's
down and
up
they
with
were
you?"
like,
And he's
go
"Ah."
off. But we spent a tremendous amount of time together. We saw movies together. We go see comedy shows together and stuff.
Oh, that's right. I saw you perform.
You saw me perform.
We
Yeah.
saw Nick
Thune.
We saw Nick Thune.
Yeah.
But then at one point I saw you perform and
Yeah.
you were great. You
Thank
did
you.
the I still think about you flipping through the names of like it's the most famous person movie star you got. And it's like no.
Oh,
no.
the Space Jam.
The Space Jam.
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
that's a
yes,
classic
yes,
Griffin
yes,
bit.
So
yes.
all this is to say is that we were friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Genuine
I
friends.
pretended like I didn't know you after she said that. It
Oh,
was.
like you were.
Yeah.
It was. I
It can't.
did not.
Yeah.
I didn't want to call any
Right.
attention to it.
'Cause
It was.
I would say pretty much everyone else in the cast I would have considered a coworker at the time, and I was like, you and I were firmly friends.
we were firmly friends, and I
Right.
let you down.
You
because
look-
she fucking
But
bought it.
And
also,
then
I
Griffin
like-
looked over to you and was like, "Do you want to do my like Star Wars podcast?" And you were like, "I'm busy."
Hey man, Yanni's
So
really busy.
Yeah, I have children. No, but when you come to New York, I'd go to LA. We'd still see each other and stuff. But a bit that Tim has kept running for years is when the trailer for Draft Day came out, my coffee spill, which was supposed to be my character introduction, was given like a prominent position in the trailer.
Yes.
And a lot of my friends were like, "Holy shit, you're in the trailer! You have like a real part in this movie." And Tim took it upon himself to correct every single person on Twitter and let them know that the coffee drop is not in the film.
Not in the film.
And
It did
especially
not make the final cut of the film.
especially
final-
when the
No, it
film
should
comes
have.
out and underperforms at the box office and people make jokes about me being in the movie and their only frame of reference is the trailer they saw. Tim will always respond, "I just need you to know the coffee drop is not in the final."
I mean, it has
Coffee
been
He's
going
kept this up for 9 years.
9 years, and especially what's great about it is that there is a draft every year.
Yeah.
So every
circulates
year
again.
somebody brings up the movie Draft Day, and I get to be like, just so
So you know.
Beyond people bringing up the movie Draft Day, I actually think Draft Day has gone from sort of like mid-sized hit
Sure.
to kind of like, oh, like a dad movie people sort of enjoy
Yeah.
on cable to like genuine quasi-cult classic.
Weirdly. I mean, Tim, have you
Yes.
had the same experience that I have where every year when the Draft Day residual checks come in, I am dumbfounded?
Yeah.
Because we were both paid like scale for that movie. Pretty much everyone was paid scale.
Yeah.
90% of the budget went to Costner,
Uh-huh.
and 5% went to the other 6 big name actors.
Were you there when Langella rapped? When Frank Langella rapped?
Rapped? Frank
When he-
Langella famously
No, I'm sorry. WRAP rap.
Oh.
Yes. I talk about this all the
Okay,
time.
that's okay.
When
That's
he
less interesting.
Took
though.
the sunglasses off. So
Well,
I think you've told this story. Have you told
Langella
it on
wears
mic?
sunglasses the entire film.
Yeah.
He says he took that from some team owner he saw in interviews who was wearing sunglasses in the interview. And he went, "That's an interesting character choice." And he wore the sunglasses on, offset, in between takes, lunch, trailer, whatever,
Yeah.
100% of the time. And then when they rapped and they went, "That's a picture rap on Frank Langella," he very dramatically, finger on each arm,
Yes.
like took the sunglasses off as if it was like,
As if it was
you were going to be like, wait, you were Frank Langella the whole time? You're not
He, like,
Cleveland
very
Browns owner,
dramatically-
Mr. Fuck? Yeah.
Yeah.
plucked them off his face and revealed himself
not
in
only
the
that,
room.
he plucked them off his face and then he went like this. He like
Oh, he
put
was
his
like,
hands on
drink
either
it
side of his
in.
face.
Yeah, like-
Yes, and then took a bow.
Yes.
Yes.
What did Leary do when he quit? When he rapped?
He went, "You know the fucking thing about rapping."
Black coffee. Okay, I just want black
coffee.
coffee. 12 ounces, black coffee. All right,
What
you
a
watch the
weird
levels
fucking
in bar right now
experience.
as I do
Yeah.
Leary. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, it's
Yeah.
fine.
I love
Everything about
This
that
is a
movie.
podcast about the films of Ivan Reitman.
Yeah.
Hey, you know who's the guy that loves to wear sunglasses indoors?
Jack
Nicholson.
Nicholson. Jack Nicholson.
He does do that, although not in The Shining, but in general.
David.
Yep.
I don't mean to backseat drive, note other people in their jobs that I have no experience with.
Okay.
I feel like the Overlook Hotel might have had a little more success posting.
On Indeed.
Yeah.
I know, because I don't know how they did this hiring
It
process.
feels like they did one interview with a guy who seems deranged from frame one.
He does have a bit of a manic stare. And, you know, look.
He really
I'll
tanked
say
the
this, when
value
you're
of this
hiring, you're
place.
supposed to leave no stone unturned.
I say this all the time.
And I think they left some stones unturned.
Many.
And
Most.
if you partner with Indeed, you're partnering with one powerful stone turner.
That's what I like to think of Indeed as the great stone turner.
Yes. Hiring platform, you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. You don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. Use their powerful hiring tools like Indeed Instant Match assessments and virtual interviews. And if you hate waiting, their US data shows that over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resume matches the job description the moment they sponsor a job.
That's good.
That all seems fine to me.
Mhm.
They've got the virtual interview, so there's nothing to download. You just click and talk. Indeed, saving you time there. You can message, schedule, interview all in one place. They're making it easy to connect with applicants. You don't have to install anything. It just works in the browser.
Sure.
And the other thing with virtual interviews is that on average, applicants who scored proficient or higher on the reliability assessment were twice as likely to be on time for work. Interesting. I think you'd fail that one, Griffin.
Yeah, I would. And that's
Bam, I
why
gotcha.
I got this job the old-fashioned way by co-creating the podcast. Look, should also mention, of course, that Indeed is run by one of Peter Hyams' sons.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, we love Peter Hyams and we love John Hyams.
Mhm.
Indeed knows when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why when you sponsor a job, you only pay for the quality applications from resumes in our database matching your job description. So visit Indeed.com/check to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/check. Indeed.com/check. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Turn some stones.
I have never looked up I want this story to be true so badly that I
What?
don't look it up.
Okay.
But apparently he has been asked not to go back to the Staples Center because he spilled homemade chili on the court. And it delayed the game because they had to clean up the homemade chili that he brought in.
I believe that is an Onion story that took on in life of itself.
Really?
That can't be real.
No, I mean, like, there are pictures of him with like a Tupperware and some chili on the floor, and he's going like, "Oh, well,
Right.
you know." But I mean, like, I don't want it to not be true.
I
So
also-
Then
I will
won't-
say
won't
this
tell you
too.
anymore.
Okay.
I feel like in recent years, when he has been captured at the Staples Center, he's sitting higher up in the bleachers. You never see him courtside anymore.
I think he's generally withdrawn from like public figure
Yes,
Jack Nicholson
yes.
life or whatever. Yeah.
I don't want to. But I want to. My buddy Matt. This is his story. But he at one point was he was in his drive. He was driving in Los Angeles, and he the cars at a stoplight were a little bit off kilter. So he's driving. His driver's window is sort of right next to the passenger back window of
Okay.
like a town car.
Sure.
So it's a little bit off kilter. The windows rolled down, and he looks over, and it's Jack Nicholson. And he gives him the little chin up nod. He just sees him and goes like that. And Jack Nicholson, they make eye contact, gives him the little nod. Jack Nicholson looks forward, and then the window goes up. He didn't even reflexively give him the little nod back and then put the window up. He just turned, and then the window went up. God bless him.
Wow.
Cool guy.
Cool guy.
We've done so many Nicholsons. I was going to
Yeah.
look at the filmography to try and
But weird
shake
ones. I mean,
this
obviously,
out.
4 James L. Brooks movies.
Yeah, so I was going to write. I was
Mars
gonna-
Attacks Batman.
See, is a lot of them, right?
Yeah.
But you're right. Like we've never done like Chinatown or
Right.
Cuckoo's Nest or Easy Rider or like
Yeah.
famous Nicholson.
Witches of
movies.
Eastwick.
Witches of Eastwick. I feel like that, but yeah, like Terms of Endearment,
Right.
obviously. But wait, Witches of Eastwick is a big one though. Yeah, Broadcast News, Batman, Mars Attacks. Yeah, that's it, I guess. But that's a
How
lot.
do you know Terms of Endearment? Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody's got to give as good as it gets. Somebody's got to give.
Right.
Nancy.
Oh, yeah.
Don't
yeah.
forget that.
No, not at all. But it is this run. I mean, we haven't sort of talked about like the initial golden age run of Nicholson, which I would say is like, I'd say Easy Rider to Shining
Pretty
is the first sort of like, because then I'd argue the James L. Brooks period
When-
is like a transitional
Terms
stage
of
in his
Endearment is
career.
3 years after this.
Yes.
And that obviously he's like, kind of flabby and
Right.
and that was like against type at that point. It was
And
like,
even-
look at Nicholson kind of like letting loose here.
Reds is 81.
Reds is 81.
Yeah, but that's him also being like, I'll be a supporting actor in your movie.
Yeah,
I'll be a character actor. I'll
Postman
lend my
always-
clout in a different way.
Postman always rings twice is the next year.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe that's
Yeah,
a
that
good
feels like a
cutoff.
transitional point.
Before then it's all basically, transformative starring roles. Easy Rider, 5 Easy Pieces, Carnal Knowledge, King of Marvin Gardens, Last Detail, Chinatown, Tommy, that's a small role.
Sure.
Uh,
Which we found out was meant to be Christopher Lee.
The Passenger, The Fortune, one of his rare bombs, Cuckoo's Nest, Missouri Breaks, things are getting weird. Last
Right.
Tycoon, things aren't going so great. Going South, which he directs.
Right.
And doesn't do great. So The Shining's actually a bit of a bounce back for
Sure.
him. It's been like a few years since like Cuckoo's Nest, which was his last like massive
I
hit.
forget who it is, but someone who worked with him had a story about like asking him how they thought the movie was going to do. Someone who was in a movie with Nicholson in the 80s or 90s, a supporting actor. And he said like, I don't make movies, I make classics.
Hey.
And it is one of those things where even when you count the bombs or like the weirdo picks in that
Fucking
run,
classic.
Yeah.
you're just like, by 1980, how many iconic Hall of Fame Mount Rushmore movies with equally iconic Mount Rushmore Hall of Fame performances does this guy have under his belt? And even if it was only like a Burt Reynolds run where then it's like, okay, and then it's diminishing returns with a few rare upticks. It's like, pretty much until he retires.
Yeah.
The highest tier of Nicholson movies is just kind of unreal.
And this,
Are you a Jack fan, Tim?
Huh?
You a Jack fan? How do you feel about
am.
Jack?
And one of the things, I have a very damaging take
Mhm.
about this movie that I don't want to bring up till later,
Okay.
because I came here to do nothing but praise this movie and these performances. But one of the things that I love about his performance in this movie, there is a lot of the stuff. It's almost like he invented the cliche of so many of the things that he does. There's a
Got it.
moment where it's the second time that he's going back to the bar, and I think he's just gotten in a fight with Wendy, and he's doing like a lot of big physical
Is that when he
movements.
does the sort of, I got 220s and 210? Like he's got that whole monologue he delivers.
It's in the walk.
It's in-
too.
okay,
It's
sure,
the
sure,
walk
sure.
down the
Mhm.
hallway where he's just like, it's like he's just silently like waving his arms. And in
Right.
the hands of like a lesser actor, that just becomes like a weird cliche of playing a crazy guy. But
Yeah.
he has a way of making that real, of having that come from a real place and feel grounded, even though I don't know. Like I think this performance of his is incredible.
Yeah.
And there are so many opportunities for it to have been wrong or in the hands of a
And
lesser actor.
It's Stephen King's big complaint, or one of his many complaints, is like the minute you see that guy, you're like, that guy's going to kill his wife and kids.
But
Like,
I actually
like
Here's-
King's like, it's supposed to be a descent into madness. This guy seems scary.
I also know a lot of people who share that opinion,
Yeah.
and like big horror fans where they're like, that's the fundamental issue with that movie, is that the first hour doesn't work because he's crazy and you're waiting for it to happen.
I actually, weirdly, I would have agreed with that until I rewatched it this time. And one of the first things that I made a note of was that in that scene where he's talking to the guys, I mean, like, yeah, it's like a little
When
weird.
he's in the
He's
interview.
like, that's intriguing. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just remember coming out of that scene thinking, wow, they really make him sort of kind of affable and likable. Like,
And
you understand
It's 'cause
why
it's Nicholson.
It's also fascinating how well they're able to dampen his charisma in a way where he's compelling to watch.
He's not being
You're
like
used to
smoothie.
the animalistic
Yes.
sort
Right,
of
yeah,
like
he's
right.
not- it's not like Easy Rider where you're like, I love this guy. Like,
Yeah.
Right. Like
Or
it does
Cuckoo's Nest
feel
or
like
whatever.
he's submitting to the Kubrick house style. And it's, as much as I understand that complaint against his casting, it's like, but it's so greatly outweighed by the stuff he does in the last half of the movie is stuff no one else could pull off.
Yeah.
And especially no other like movie star of that stature. And your point is interesting, Tim, because it's like, in a way, this kind of is his Scent of a Woman, right? Where it's like, this is the performance where the guy sort of codifies all of his tricks and ticks
Yes.
into, such definitive performance that's all kind of like bombast and whatever.
Yes.
But Pacino has a hard time coming back out after that.
Right. It feels like even though Pacino made fun movies in the 90s,
Yeah.
right? It's like he uncorked something and he
Right.
can't.
And
it's
more rare
He
that
knows he can do that now, and he's
Yeah.
just kind of like,
He's
he's
like-
like, just fucking do that.
All of a sudden, he's like trying to push a rope, and it's like,
Right.
that doesn't work.
Like the whole thing in Heat, where
Push
he's like, I
him.
play the guy like he's on coke, and I'm like, you did that well. I'm
Right.
not saying it's a bad performance, but it kind of feels like every movie he walked into, he's like, I feel like this guy's on coke. And
Yeah.
he's like, what?
Yes.
Like, he's like,
But it's
I don't
like
know.
I can't play 100% normal again. Like he had to justify.
Until like Insomnia. That's what's so
Yeah.
interesting about Insomnia. He's like, I feel like this guy's on anti-coke or whatever. Wait.
But then
Should I just do the
yes,
awful
yes,
take
yeah,
right
no,
away?
say it, say it,
What
say it.
is it?
In that second scene at so he
Oh, the
talks
bars
like where
with
the
Joe
big
Turco.
party is happening.
Yes.
He's like, I want to know who's buying my drinks.
Right, because the first bar scene, it's empty. The second
Yes,
bar
and
scene,
the second
room
one
is full.
full.
Right.
His performance in that second scene is about 0.5% away from an I think you should leave Tim Robinson
Oh,
performance.
I mean,
It
like,
is it is madness. And the reason I almost don't want to say that is because I don't want it almost affects the rest of the movie because you then start seeing, oh no, this is a Tim Robinson
Well, but
performance.
I'll say this. I think it's the enunciation, right? Like, which obviously is partly Kubrick being like, and take 87. And like
Yeah.
Nicholson's probably just like, I don't know, should I hit this
Try
word differently?
something.
Like, what the
Right.
fuck does this guy want?
Right.
But like, obviously, that's what Robinson is so good at, and I think you should leave or whatever. Like, where he just says a sentence where you're like, I never would imagine someone saying this sentence this
Yes,
way.
but
Yeah.
he's kind of doing that. It's like, yeah, I would like a drink.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I would like.
But that's why
I
it's
don't-
fascinating that he gives great subdued performances after this, because you do feel like if he successfully uncorks this in this movie,
Mhm.
the temptation to just like, I can do that.
I'm watching.
You guys
it
will
right
let
now.
me get away with
You'll
this?
let me go this big?
Sure, right, yeah. Like, right. Why don't I just lean on that forever now?
Right.
I can do that.
They-
I'm watching it, and you're right. I mean, like, he's got this weird, like, crazy guy swagger. He's kind of playing with his jacket
Yeah.
in this kind of like, way.
Yes, like
Uh,
that. If you look at all the other scenes, you can kind of see it a little bit. And I don't want to uncork this because I don't want this to come across as me denigrating the performance, because I think it's amazing. And this is going to tie into my general thought about this entire thing, is that low key MVP of this movie is Shelley Duvall.
Agreed.
Oh,
100%.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
one of the things that I love about that first scene, like why I disagree with the take of, oh, he's not the right, it's a descent into madness.
Mhm.
Those two scenes back and forth of Shelley Duvall at the house with Danny
Mhm.
and him being interviewed for the job,
Yeah.
you not only understand like why these guys would you understand why he's the guy who's in a position to take a job like this. So he's not like a guy that's going to take over the world.
Right.
You also understand why they would have hired him, because he's charming and affable enough. And you also understand, like, he has like the domestic violence undertones of this
Yes.
movie that really stuck out. And I want to be gentle in the way that I talk about this, because obviously, yes,
It's loaded with the history of this film and everything.
yes,
Yeah.
it is. You understand the character wise, you understand why the wife is with him. Like, you understand
Yeah.
Right.
why when he says, I'm sorry, I won't do this again, why she believes him.
100%.
And you also see that underlying thing, that violence in him, and you see her giving like these rehearsed things of like, you know, and he did a great job and it's been 5 months, and you're like, oh no.
the whole speech she gives about like, it's a thing
Oh.
you do 100 times. You grab your kid's arm or whatever.
It's
And you
heartbreaking.
almost believe it, and then you're almost just like completely so sad about, but like that's the thing. Like, King obviously writes this novel, it's about himself. It's about like a frustrated academic who's an
Mhm.
alcoholic, who's can't get ahead, and he slowly goes mad. And so then he sees this movie and he's like, well, I'm not this fucking guy.
Right.
Like, that's so much of the undertone of King's objection to this movie.
The other part of it too is that, like King has said, like, my father was like a man with rage issues and it could be prone to violence, and like when I became a father, I was worried about that within myself, and like the being a new parent thing where suddenly you find yourself having so much animosity at this child because they won't go to bed or finish their dinner or whatever.
Yeah.
Like the level of rage you uncork
And
there,
you're
that he got
afraid of that. Like,
scared seeing the shadows of his father in that. And this book is written from the perspective of a man who is like come to terms with that, developed a healthy relationship to his children, has come to terms with his own like history and all of that sort of shit, his father and everything. But I think it scares him to see this movie where it's like, oh, this guy's like a bomb waiting to go off.
Yeah.
Right. But then
Yeah.
that's the thing. It's like, I don't watch this movie and think like, oh, he's like a psycho who's going to go crazy.
Sure.
But you do think like, oh, this is a guy who's bottled so much up.
Yes.
And in that interview scene, he's a little charming. And
Yeah.
he answers the questions the right way.
Yeah.
And also, I love about that interview scene. And again, I do think this is what Kubrick gets out of doing 100 takes of boring dialogue. Like, suddenly everything sounds stilted in this really cool way. Like, you get the sense that they're just like, can we get this over with? We need to leave this hotel.
Yeah.
Like, who fucking cares? Like,
Right.
they don't really care if this guy's going to chop up his family. Like the way they talk about it, where they're like, it was an unfortunate incident. Like, it's
He almost chuckles. The guy,
yeah.
what's
He's
his
like,
name? He
to bring
chuckles.
it
He's
up.
like, well,
and he's like, my predecessor. I mean,
he,
Yeah.
he killed his family. Like,
it's just like, you just think like everyone is just trying to ignore the thing that the elephant in the room. And that's how you feel about Shelley Duvall. Like, and that's just how I feel about all of it. When everything, it should feel natural that everything goes to shit.
Another thing about the Shelley Duvall
but also it's
performance-
ghosts.
Yes, ghosts.
Which
Ghosts.
is Kubrick's take. He's
Yeah.
like, it's ghosts.
Yeah.
Like, because that's why I don't talk about it. Like, he gets so resistant to the king thing of like, well, this is a metaphor. And he's like, that's too depressing. Ghosts. It's about what if ghosts drove you crazy? Like, which is interesting. Yeah.
There's this fascinating thing that JJ, our researcher, pulled up.
Okay.
This like early conversations between King and Kubrick. And I mean, we could dig into this more, but it was like Off of Barry Lyndon was a flop, and he's made several movies now that were like so huge and unwieldy and whatever that he was like, I need like kind of a commercial genre play, right? And I the challenge of, can I make the scariest movie of all time? Like, that's how to make myself excited about this. He reads through a bunch of horror books until he finds The Shining, and that's the one. There's this great anecdote from like his secretary at the time,
Sure.
where she said she kept on delivering stacks of different.
The books hitting the wall.
Right.
Right.
She'd deliver stacks, like, just get me all the bestseller horror novels. And every 10 minutes, she'd hear a book hit the wall, right? Like, he'd like read it and they'd be like, this is trash, and would throw it against the wall into the garbage. And then one day she didn't hear it happen for like 2 hours. She was like, fuck, that's a good sign. She
I
opens
mean,
the
those
door and
books are page
his
turners.
nose
Yeah.
is buried deep in The Shining. And she's like, I think the search is over. But he reaches out. Do you know the quote I'm talking about?
I don't, but I can start looking at the dossier. I did read
Kubrick
it.
reaches out to King and says he like wants to do this, and he's like, "There's something kind of sweet and like poetic, optimistic about the ending that ghosts are real, that there's like a thing."
Yes, right. Yeah, right.
And he's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, it's just kind of sweet, like to consider that there is like an afterlife, like
all right, let me get you the
Yes,
quote, because
yes.
it is really good. Right. Like, King obviously calls up Kubrick calls up King, and King is still, he's famous, but he's like, Jesus Christ, Stanley Kubrick's on
Yeah.
the phone. Like, he's so flattered. And King, the first thing Kubrick says is, the whole idea of a ghost is optimistic, isn't it? And King is like, huh? What are you talking about? And he says, well, the concept of a ghost presupposes life after death. That's a cheerful concept, isn't it? And King is silent and then says, but what about hell? And Stanley Kubrick is just quiet and then says, I don't believe in hell. And King's like, okay. But it's just that, Kubrick is not whatever, like engaging with
he's
whatever
selectively,
whatever personal like demons are fueling King. Is like King is like, ghosts are like, no, those are the things that haunt you, that reflect, the traumas of your life.
And he's like, "No, I don't think about that. Isn't that nice that we kept
Isn't
like,
it
keep
nice
on
that you
picking
can just be,
around?"
like, eternally giving a blowjob wearing a bear costume? That's nice.
That's
Like,
nice.
You watch this movie and my takeaway is not really like Stanley Kubrick thinks ghosts are nice.
No, it's
like, so I don't really know. It's a funny anecdote.
this movie's it's so bizarre. It's one of those things where like even watching this, I felt the like, am I like kind of dreading doing this episode just because it is one of the most like chewed upon movies ever, and people who go so far in different directions with it in terms of like what they want it to reflect or what they choose to focus on and everything.
I started so the things that I did to prepare were I've watched the movie a few times. I started watching the Stephen King Shining miniseries.
Yeah,
with
with Steven
Weber.
Weber.
I've never
Yeah.
watched it before.
I bought what is apparently like clearly a bootleg copy off of eBay.
Right. It's weirdly hard to find these days.
And it's not great. Elliot Gould's in it.
Really playing
He
who?
plays the guy, the boss guy.
Right.
And
Oh,
he's,
really?
And he's like really aggressive of like,
Huh.
I cannot believe that the board has decided to entrust this beautiful historic hotel to an alcoholic. I mean, it's like the most it's not great.
And they use the original hotel that like
Right.
King stayed in, that he based it on,
Yes.
not this like magnificent, scary fucking lodge that Kubrick finds.
And Ben, the whole thing is like that miniseries was Stephen King being like, okay, time to roll up my sleeves and show you folks the real Shining.
It's like it's like 6 hours long though. Like it's
Yeah,
like
no,
it's
I
the
didn't watch
whole
all of it.
book.
Yeah.
And it was on ABC, so like how scary
Right.
can it be?
And it's
Like,
Andrew
right? Like,
McCarthy, which feels like him overcorrecting this. Like, I want you to not believe this guy could go crazy at the beginning of the film.
Yes.
it's-
And you're like, but is Andrew McCarthy ever going to be able to get to Jack Heights by
Wait,
the end?
is it McCarthy or I thought it was
no, it's Steven Weber.
Stephen Weber.
Oh, it's Stephen
Stephen
Weber.
Weber,
Jesus
not-
Christ. Why was
Rebecca
I thinking McCarthy?
De Mornay plays
Rebecca De Mornay
yeah.
is Wendy.
Weird.
Melvin Van Peebles plays Dick Halloran, right?
Cool.
And let's see, Pat Hingle apparently is in it. Commissioner Gordon himself. That's all?
Tony
Wow.
is actually like there is like a floating teenage Tony who talks,
Oh,
and
you
Tony,
like see him.
you see him, and also Tony is seems to be a little bit more of a figure that like Rebecca De Mornay will ask, "Hey, how is the job interview going?" And the kid will be like, "It's going good. He's gonna get the job."
Oh, he's like a sort of seer.
He's like a seer,
right,
and
right,
the
right.
mom knows to ask and is like, "Oh, that's great," you know. But I also started watching Room 237.
Sure.
Sure.
Documentary, people know it probably about shining obsessives and
Yes.
conspiracy theories
Yes.
and all that.
It's a movie about how many different ways this movie can be read.
But
and the
it's also
certainty
just
with
about
which-
that obsessive mindset in general.
Yes.
It's trying to
It's
be,
like
right?
proto QAnon.
I guess so. I don't know.
A little. It
Yeah.
has.
How like you can dig so deep that you're like in an entirely new hole.
If
in a
I could
weird
just
way.
vindicate
Yes.
myself quickly, Andrew McCarthy was in the American remake of The Kingdom, which I think was also for ABC, the Lars von Trier
and
Kingdom.
also right, Stephen King.
I just
That was-
confused those two projects.
That's
Go
fair.
on.
So as I was watching it, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. Like I do feel like it's going to be hard to do this episode because this is one of like this is well worn area.
Yeah.
But as I was watching it, I was like, this seems maybe a lot more. This seems a lot less complicated than people are making it. If you
I
just
think
look
so
at it
too.
from like a domestic violence,
Right.
but also at one and like maybe this is me oversimplifying it. But the first time he's at the bar, he says, "I'd sell my soul for a glass of beer."
Yeah.
And then a bartender appears and gives him a drink. It's like, I don't know, maybe it's the fucking devil. Like, I don't like it seems so direct that it's like,
Look, the whole reason I think that people obsess over this movie and Kubrick movies in general, and I like Stanley Kubrick,
Mhm.
is that every single scene looks so magnificent
Yeah.
in its blocking and
Yeah.
staging that you're like, this has to mean something.
Right.
Which, like, it's not like Stanley Kubrick's just like, yeah, and I'll point the camera over there. It looks nice. Like, obviously, he's thinking a lot about like, when I think of Room 237 and the way the band, the band's around the bathtub, the way everything's perfectly like set, it's so indelible. You know, when you think about the girls standing there and then the cuts to them being, it's all beautiful.
Yeah.
But then you like watch Room 237, they're like, I think it's about the moon landing. Why? Well, the kid wears like a moon sweater and you're like,
Right.
Anything else? No. Like, I think it's about like it's on an Indian burial ground. Oh, is that because someone says that and then there's like
No,
a fucking
there's like a
can with an
label,
Indian barrel,
right,
an
on
Indian
a
headdress?
can of food in the background.
And then I'm like,
Yeah.
so what do you mean? And they're like, well, it's like, they angered the Indian, burial ground. And I'm
And
like,
4th
yeah,
of
but the
July,
premise
what a
of
haunted
80
day.
horror movies,
Right,
fine. Like,
right.
I don't mind that. That's fine. Like,
And
I don't really
also-
care what is happening here.
I'll say this too. Like, Nope just came out, a movie that all three of us like. Ben, you haven't seen it yet?
Not yet.
But there's like
We're supposed
such.
to say nope.
Yeah, you should have said no.
Can
To
we
track
take
to
it again?
Christ.
Have
Have you learned nothing?
you ever listened to this show? Ben, you should have said no
You should have said no.
to that question.
Fuck.
The industry around like the second Nope is released, every single outlet has all the Easter eggs decoding Nope.
Sure.
what
the,
it
the way
means.
the modern
Right.
internet
And even
responds to
you
these
watch the
things,
movie and
right.
you're immediately like, I guess I got to read some articles on this.
Theories?
You texted us, I feel like, and we had our Blank Dough thread as well. We're just sort of like, what are the good note pieces you guys have read? What are the things? And I think you get to a point where people like, and I think successfully, but like Peele, Shyamalan at times, certainly, Ari Aster to a degree. You have filmmakers now who are sort of consciously constructing movies like this,
Mhm.
where they're like, I know the expectations going into my movies are that people are going to look to do that work to crack the puzzle. So why not put that many weird sort of puzzle pieces in there? Whereas I think Kubrick was not intentionally like leaving a trail of
Yeah.
breadcrumbs for people to.
Maybe he thinks that's interesting, the Indian.
Sure.
I'm just sort of like, that's fine. That's a totally fine read.
Yeah.
It just doesn't strike me as something where I'm like, throw everything else away.
Right.
From minute one, I'm only thinking about Indian burial grounds, or like where I'm like, it's fun to read into movies. I love that. That's
I do too.
fine.
It's great. It also doesn't mean that it's true.
Right. And
Yeah.
it becomes this weird sort of thing of like, no, we have to investigate the secret message the director was leaving for
Yes.
us. And I feel like most of the time when directors get interrogated, like Lynch or Kubrick, or
Yeah.
who are people obsess over the most, they're kind of like, what do you think? and you're like blah blah blah, and they're like, yeah,
Interesting.
I like that,
Right.
you know, like, or like, you know, you should think what you think. Like, it's rare that like Lynch should just be like, wrong, Mulholland Drive's not about that.
Right.
Think again.
The secret message part of it is the interesting part to me, because people watch this movie, not everyone, but so many people watch this film going like, what's the thing I'm supposed to decode here?
Yeah.
Right? And it's not just like, what is the secret meaning of this film? But they treat it almost like it's like a fucking Dan Brown, you know, like, what is the puzzle left by the Knights Templar to uncover a conspiracy?
Obviously, it's compelling to fold this conspiracy theory moon landing shit into it and be
Right.
like, he was, you know, he's telling
It's
us
his
something.
confession.
Like, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
confession, you know, like, that's cute. But
It's cute.
I've
That's
never
my
really gone
exact
beyond
response.
that, beyond the fact that he wears a
I-
fucking moon. Right? That's the main
I
thing,
think,
right?
to your point, what you're saying, Tim, it's like I started watching the movie feeling daunted by like, how the fuck are we going to talk about this? And then I just watched the movie. I'm like, oh, I can just talk about the movie I
Talk
just
about the movie
watched.
because it's fucking great.
Right, we could just not feel the burden of fucking everything this movie culturally
Yes.
represents.
The other thing apparently is that the moon is 237,000 miles away from the Earth,
This
which
shit.
it actually is, and it's like 238. But
Yeah.
I guess it's
I mean,
close
by the
enough.
end of this, we're all going to be like, it's about the movie.
Oh,
It's about the
this is
moon.
a moony movie.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I want to throw this out, and it's related to what we're talking about. And I recognize the irony that I have come on a podcast, which is like a talky medium.
One of the
I'm
talkiest.
fucking so sick of talking.
Yes.
As a performer, I guess I'm sick of talking, and I am sick of the take industrial. This is very stupid. The take industrial complex surrounding television and movies, where like the thing that always comes to mind is the last episode of Mad Men aired. I
Mhm.
watched it. I enjoyed it.
sure.
And then the next day, and even later that night, you have 1,500 articles where every person involved in the production tells you exactly what it means.
Right. Yeah. It became more.
and
yeah.
The
So-
overall history being published 3 hours after the thing is released.
Yes.
Yes.
And so there is that part of me where as much as I have both read and enjoyed some of those and also participated in some of those as a performer, one thing that was really exciting about Nope, and one of the reasons that I wrote to you guys to be like, what do you guys have on this, is because I didn't really want somebody to tell me what it was. I just wanted to read people
Right.
being excited about it. I
Right.
Yeah.
wanted to that was one of the things I loved about Nope. And so it
Yes.
was like one of those times where a rare time where I really wanted to hear. I really wanted to hear more about what people thought about it.
But that's like, I mean, the thing that's so exciting about Peele is that he's making movies at such a high level
Mhm.
that are like super commercial, mainstream, in the sense that like you put his name on a poster and it's going to open big and everyone's going to see it and engage with it. And part of the experience is that people know I'm going to see this movie and I'm going to need to talk about it afterwards.
Yeah.
And that people want to do the fucking work on his movies. That there's that kind of like challenge to them where it's just the best thing. And I had this thing, Nope, and I had this Us opening weekend where it's like people spill out of the theater really slowly. And then they hang around outside and they're like, so what do you think that was?
Hmm.
And it just feels like we so rarely get that rather than the sort of pre-digested take.
Yeah.
Here's how you're supposed to process this thing.
Yeah.
And this movie is such a, dare I say it, Rosetta Stone for engaging with movies in that kind of way. But
Little bit.
but it's such an extreme example of it getting like gamified. And I think Room 237, where people were sort of saying like, "Oh, are you guys going to do a Patreon episode on that?" It's like, no, just watch that movie. We don't need to do an episode on that movie. And I think the bigger
we thought
point-
about it, but right, it's
Right.
sort of like, what are we going to say?
What are we gonna say?
Right.
But the bigger point of that movie, I think, is almost like about the weird relationship so many different people will have to this movie in so many different ways, rather than trying to solve that film.
But like, people do it. Like, 2001 obviously is one of those like, wait, what's the meaning of that? What was happening at the end there? Obviously, Eyes Wide Shut has become this thing where people are like, he's telling us about like Jeffrey Epstein and like Hollywood sex abuse.
This
and,
weird
like,
Kubrick, so dark the con of man. Every film is like, it's this very like QAnon way of approaching things where it's like the confession is right in front of our eyes and we need to decode it. And everything has to be some like buried message left to be discovered.
very secret.
Buried secret of M. Night Shyamalan.
This happened recently where like a sort of an ex-family member has been texting. Long story short, it turns out that this person is kind of gotten some QAnon shit.
Oh, sure.
Mm.
And
Sure,
is
sure, sure.
texting someone still in the family.
some threads or some check this
Yes.
video out or whatever, right?
They texted, they were like, here's all this crazy stuff that happens in Hollywood. And I mean, Tim has mentioned that Hollywood's crazy before. And I was like, yeah.
It's a little crazy.
Yeah.
But why didn't you think of the 15,000 other fucking reasons it could
Right,
be an insane place to work before we harvest children for adrenochrome or whatever the fuck?
Just admit it. Just admit
You like
that you
adrenochrome.
harvest children for
Let's
adrenochrome.
admit
Whatever
it. It'd make
that
your life
is.
so much easier.
That's what you make your film stock out of, probably something like that. That's what
Yeah.
you're doing.
It's hard to
Kodachrome,
find.
adrenochrome. Wait a second. The clues were there the whole time.
They were, and honestly, Dr. Sleep is kind of about that. Like Dr. Sleep, the sequel to
Yeah.
which I feel like is actually a better movie than maybe people are willing to give
Good
it
movie.
credit
I think
for.
the movie
Good movie. We're all
rules,
fans
and
of that
rewatching
movie.
this made me even appreciate Dr.
And
Sleep
the director's
more.
cut is an
We are
improvement if
doing
you
that
haven't
on
seen it.
Patreon.
Oh, you
rather
are?
than
Okay.
Patreon.
I actually
Yeah.
haven't seen the director's
It's
cut,
worth-
but I will have to
yeah,
go
worth
check it
checking
out
out.
because I
Yeah.
really liked it. But that is like, guys, like that's just like part of that's just part of that movie.
I'm
Like
trying to
Yes.
remember now. Like, yeah,
they're
I know
just
what
like
you
they're
mean,
trying to get the gas from the kids.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
guys,
Tremblay.
if we were really doing that, do you think we'd? I don't know.
You think
It
we'd
is-
leave hints in movies
Yeah.
about it?
It
Right,
is
sure,
fascinating,
sure.
though. Right. The hints part of it is always what confuses me, where you're like, you think these people have these secrets that they have to hold on to their dying day, but yet they leave these hints out in public to
Yes.
sort of like taunt everyone into like, you'll never fucking catch me. And the weirdness of the Kubrick thing, where so much of it is that like, he doesn't do press. There's years in
Sure.
between the films. He's got such a
He lives
sort
in
of
like a castle in
sense
England.
of control
like,
over
yeah.
his movies. He's so mysterious that people just are going like every one of his movies is him revealing the secrets that he can't directly speak about, the weird subcultures, conspiracies, and mysteries that he's gotten too close to, where it's like you think he's tied to all of this. He's like the one man link between every secret society, every like American ill, you know? And it's just like, I don't know, he just might be a guy. David?
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service showing exceptional films from around the globe. Every day Mubi premieres a new film. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there's always something new to discover. With Mubi, each and every film is hand-selected. It's like your own personal film festival, streaming anytime, anywhere. Now, I'm sure our listeners right now are thinking, is this a rerun? Are they replaying an old ad? I've heard this before. Mubi sponsored a lot of episodes.
No.
I'm used to this. Old hat.
No.
And they're like, oh, so it's one of those variations. What is it? The Movie podcast, them releasing Decision to Leave. I've heard this before. Brand new angle from Mubi sponsoring this show.
Yes. They have a print-only magazine called
Yes.
Notebook.
They just sent me a copy,
They did. David sent me one too. It's devoted to the art and the culture of cinema.
which we like.
We love cinema. It's
Big fans.
created, prepared, and published by Mubi biannually. It's a yearly subscription. You get 2 beautiful, thick
It's
issues.
a fucking handsome looking thing.
Each issue comes with an exclusive gift, a surprise just for subscribers, and shipping is free wherever you are.
Yeah.
Subscriptions are now open for issues 2 and 3. You can subscribe to the magazine now for $40 a year. Find out more at mubi.com/magazine.
Mm-hmm.
In issue 1, you've got an in-depth conversation with Ryusuke Hamaguchi,
Cool.
artist Yoshitomo Nara. Sorry, I want to get his name right.
You did.
Okay.
Let's
A
hope.
chorus, maybe. A chorus of personal reflections and stories shared by exiled Afghan filmmakers.
Cool.
All kinds of cool stuff. Contributions by Christopher Doyle. Look, it's a very cool issue. You can check it out.
I'm flying out late tomorrow. I'm going to take that
Yeah, bring
fucking
it with
copy
ya.
of the notebook with me, read through that thing.
You can try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/check. That's mubi.com/check for a whole month of great cinema for free, of course, but also mubi.com/magazine.
Also, Decision to Leave in theaters. Also, Movie podcast. Also, Cineast Cow.
All right, let me give you some context.
Please.
While we
Yeah.
might as well actually get on to researched evidence of Stanley
Sure.
Kubrick's thinking.
Yes.
Post Barry Lyndon, as you say, Kubrick doesn't know what to do with himself.
Mhm.
The movie's not exactly a colossal hit, although it does get Oscar nominations. So, like you say, he's just reading. He's reading. pulling anything he can find, newspapers, magazines, anything. Patty Chayefsky approached him
To do network.
to direct Network, which is an interesting what if.
Yep.
Because I feel like Lumet is a master, but Lumet is the master of like, I'll mold myself to whatever this project is. I do all kinds of different stuff.
I mean, in the opening
Kubrick's the
credits for that
opposite.
movie,
Like-
it's Patty Chayefsky's Network. And I
Right.
remember people at the time asked Lumet, like, why did you do that? And he's like, well, he's like the major author of this film. I just directed it.
I mean, look, that's what's so good about Lumet.
Like, he was so generous about it where he was just like, I'm just serving this script.
You say Lumet and you say Lumet.
I say Lumet.
I say Lumet.
It is Lumet. I think I say Lumet as
Yeah.
like a matter of
Pretentious.
okay.
like, I
Yeah.
think it's I do it all
I've
the
been
time.
thinking
It's
I
Sidney
No.
Lumet, right?
It's
It is?
Sidney
Did you
Lumet.
ever read the Lumet book?
It's
The-
incredible.
The best.
I love that
The
he's
number
just
one
like,
best book on movies.
Here's how to make movies. Don't forget to take a nap at lunch.
Everything
It's
about
the
it's so
best.
practical.
I avoided reading that book for years because I thought it was going to be like a lot of director books where they're like, let me take you through my filmography. And I was like, I should watch more of his movies before I read
Right.
that book. And then one day I cracked it open and it's obviously more just that. It's just
Yeah.
him being like, let me tell you about what it is like to make a movie. Every element you have to balance. Like,
Right.
And he mixes in some anecdotes. I mean,
Yeah.
you must be obsessed with this book. Like,
Yeah.
it's like your favorite,
Yes,
right?
Yes.
But
But
like-
there's every type of thing. Like, he talks about like taking a nap. I mean, it's like the fucking
Talking to actors.
the
like
Michael
what looking at
Caine,
rushes is like.
teaching acting,
Yeah.
especially that was then transcribed into the book, where it's just like, okay, here's what you should eat
Right. Yeah.
or not eat.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of shit.
Yeah, you don't want to
Um,
turn up to set on with like bacon in your stomach
Right.
or whatever.
And then
it is.
Lumet will like talk about shit where he's like, I made this movie Daniel about a suicidal guy. So my big choice was like never show the sky.
Yeah.
So it feels really claustrophobic. And like save it until the end of the movie where his world finally opens up. And you're like, that's smart filmmaking.
That-
What's also smart filmmaking is like,
you know, have a banana in the morning.
Right.
or whatever.
right, always have a pocket banana.
The other thing that's amazing about that book is that Lumet like never worked in Hollywood. Like that's why he's the greatest ever. Like
Yeah.
he says, like I shot like one movie in LA. Like,
Right.
I always just work on location. Or
But it's like, I fucked this one up. Here's what I learned about what I did
love
wrong
that,
here.
too.
Yeah.
And when he's so mean about some actor, but he won't name him, and you're like,
Yeah.
Sidney, you class act. Anyway, Kubrick considered for Network, liked the script, but Chayefsky eventually is like, you shouldn't do it. We're two control freaks. It won't work.
It's two type
Which is-
A's. will
Seems
clash.
very correct.
Yep.
He reads The Shining.
Mhm.
He's consumed by it. He had seen Carrie, but otherwise has no experience with Stephen King and not read Stephen King's books or anything. Look, in this research, there's a lot of him being kind of like, you know, a little passive aggressive about Stephen King, or a little like backhand complimenty where he's like, Stephen's, you know, ingenuity lies in construction of the story. I don't think he's very interested in writing himself or whatever. You know, like
Yeah, there's that quote
he
I
keeps
saw
sort of
from
saying
him.
like, look, he's a little trashy, but
he puts like
he
every idea he
writes a
has
good
on the
yarn.
page without
Right.
editing, which makes for a compelling read, but doesn't make for a compelling movie. But I also think Kubrick's whole thing was like, a movie's not about what it's about how it's about it.
Sure.
So he's just like, Kubrick lays out a really good plot, King rather.
Right. Yeah.
Gives
He
me
likes-
a really good plot, really good elements. I can make whatever movie I want with that as a blueprint.
and the way he puts it is he's just very compelled by the you're going to be in this movie for so long wondering. I mean, it's such a simple concept now, maybe a little different then.
Mhm.
Is this guy crazy or are these supernatural events? Like he loved, I mean, he just loved, he calls it ingenious and exciting, an extraordinary balance between the psychological and the supernatural. I guess I don't know enough about horror literature to know. Maybe that really was revolutionary when King's writing, where he's like, I'm writing a character study of a broken guy, like of an alcoholic.
Mhm.
And so you can read this book for a long time thinking like, am I, you know, is this an unreliable narrator? Like, is this just not supernatural?
Sure.
I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Surely not. I mean,
Yeah,
it's been going on since fucking whatever, right?
also-
Jekyll and Hyde or whatever. You know,
not
yeah, I
not
don't
to
know.
be like a fucking obvious motherfucker.
Okay, well then don't be.
Fine, then I retract the statement. I was
what were
about
you
to
gonna
make.
say? What were you gonna say?
Did you guys find, as I did, that this movie plays differently post-pandemic?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Jesus. That
I
was
mean,
one
for
of the things that I
sure,
wanted
right?
to talk about.
Right? Because you do have that thing where, like, even beyond, like, the alcoholism, this guy's sort of latent rage, you know, his own anger, what have you, there is that thing where watching it, I'm like, yeah, I understand how being stuck in one place for this long would eventually make you break your fucking brain. And I do find now that, like, if, like, I had stomach troubles yesterday. I spent the whole day in bed. it's so much easier. It takes so much less for me to start feeling like I'm losing my mind if I am in isolation for 24 hours after spending like 15 months in isolation. Like it slips back so quickly to like, what is my reality?
Like somebody I know got heat stroke one time, and apparently once the body gets heat stroke for the first time,
Yeah.
it's almost like the body says, and I'm not a doctor. It's like the body says, "Oh, well, now we know how to get there," and it becomes so.
It's a
I
quicker
had
pathway. Yeah.
Over the course of the pandemic, twice I had to go to Canada to finish jobs. So I had to do 2 separate 2-week hotel quarantines.
Sure. Right. Yeah.
And one thing about spending 2 straight weeks in one room without leaving is that you go insane very fast.
Yep.
And so, yes, this did hit differently post-pandemic, especially because by like the 11th day, you're like, I belong in here. I don't exist anywhere else. And frankly, I don't want to go out there because it's better for me.
And there's no going back. I can't be the person I was.
No, I can't be the person.
Right.
And that pathway,
Yes.
I remember the second time,
I
hit that on like day 5 because the body was like, oh, we know where we're going.
That's the thing. Right. I mean, when I got COVID, and I was pretty lucky in that I got a pretty mild case, and I was like free of symptoms and testing positive again after like 5 days or whatever. When I text David and Ben and Marie on like a Sunday to say like I just tested positive, we got to fucking reschedule episodes for the next 10 days or whatever, I was like, I feel not great, not horrendous.
Right.
The thing that scares me most is I just now have this like,
you just have
I have to be alone in my apartment for 10 days, and I'm just preemptively worried about knowing how quickly my mind is going to slip into just like Jack Torrance shit.
So it's 34.
I'll be in this hotel forever. I've been here forever.
It's 34:11 into the movie, and you get the title screen a month later, and he has lost it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, big deal. 1 month later,
Yeah, sure.
like,
Right. You're like, fuck you,
post-pandemic. Whereas before this shit,
Ben,
Right.
he didn't have
would,
Netflix.
I would have related a little bit
Yes.
more to the isolation. I'm like, whatever.
Whatever,
You know?
you can deal with that.
A month, and
Right.
you're already showing signs of insanity.
I watched this movie, and maybe it is a little bit of a post-pandemic thing. I've seen this movie 1 billion times.
Sure.
It's like one of my favorite movies. But just the tour they do,
Yeah.
where, and you know, Scatman's, you know, doing a great job. Just he's so friendly. Like,
I want to circle back to Scatman, who I think is the second MVP of this
I
movie.
mean, he fucking rules.
Yeah.
But like where he's like, and in here we've got like 20 chickens and 8, and I'm just like, obviously there's the comforting side of like, great, they've got enough food. And then the other side of like, fuck, like this is it. It's for you. You're going to be locked in here. Like, I just start to, like, my hands itch.
Yeah.
There was one thing.
What are we going to eat tonight, love? I don't know. Another fucking lamb shoulder or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
I have a
Leg
thing
shoulder?
about like transitional spaces. And there's a great moment in the movie where the family comes up and the guys are kind of walking them around and they show them that room. And it's like, why can't they like stay up in like the nice penthouse room? Why do they have to stay in like that shit?
Right, in like a boring hotel room. Right.
They're showing them around during that tour. The fact that it's like so busy, it's one of the scariest things is this idea that it's so busy, but they're like by 5 o'clock, it's going to be like no one was ever here.
Right.
That transitional time has got to be fucking terrifying.
I started thinking about it, and I think there's a little more of it in the book, which I haven't read in a long time, of the idea of like you sit down and then you watch people leave.
Yeah.
And it's like watching sand through an hourglass where you're like, oh, they're not coming back.
That's
They're not
another
coming
one
back.
that's gone forever.
And then like, you know, the janitors start to go and you're like, off they go. And then it's like just Scatman maybe. And he's like, all right, guys.
All right.
Creak. You know, we don't see it, obviously. We just cut forward. But like, that is so scary to think about.
It's any
I
of those.
wouldn't take this job.
I wouldn't either. It's like any of those movies or TV shows where people are on like Arctic bases, you know, like The Thing or whatever, where it's just like,
that life.
cargo delivery. This is the first new face you see for 6 months, and then you can set your watch at 6 months until there's another. You know, have either of you guys ever seen any of you guys? There's the great fucking Twilight Zone episode. I'm trying to remember what it's called, but it's Jack Warden, and he's like stuck in a weird desert in a small house with his wife. The lonely. He's got this beautiful wife, and you're like, is this some experimental? Is he here for research? What is this? And then these guys come down to get him, and it turns out like, no, this is a form of prison.
Right. He's been like put on an asteroid or whatever.
He's been put
Yeah,
on an
yeah,
asteroid.
right,
He's
right.
on like a prison planet where the whole thing is isolation. But they're like, we don't want them to totally lose their mind, so we give him a robot. So there's like someone to talk to. And his wife is this robot, and they're like, we can't take the robot back with us because she's too heavy. There's not space for her on the ship. And he's just like, my entire identity has become
being in love with this robot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can't.
right.
I can't. Like he's like, I have to kill one of you. I have to get off this planet, but I can't lose her. You know, and it's like he gets so conditioned to this bizarre reality, this punishment.
At the end, the guy shoots the robot, and then she's a robot, and that snaps him out of it. Right? Like that's what it
Yeah.
is. That's the
Yeah, you
ending.
see her face like
It's
with
all
all the
wires.
gears and
It's a
wires
good-
under.
it's a
It's
cool
a really
episode.
fucking good episode. Yeah.
Problematically, when I think about the show Westworld, it
Yeah.
never really hit for me because mostly I'm just like, I don't know, turn them off.
Right.
You know what I mean? Just turn it off. Like,
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm sorry, this robot loves its daughter. Okay, they're both fucking robots. I don't know, turn them off.
Yeah.
You would be considered a villain in Westworld.
I think I would be a villain in Westworld.
Honestly, you might have been good at like one of the guys with like the iPads. who's like, "Ah, the
Turn
fucking
them
thing."
off.
It's like the trauma meter is so high on why is this thing so traumatized? Back to the death storyline.
I don't know. I mean, like, does anybody feel bad about, like, one of the parents, like, at my kid's school even asked me, they're like, well, what if you found out that, you know, our son was a robot? I don't know, fucking turn him off. Like, what the fuck? Like, what if I found out the toaster didn't work? I don't, like,
Sure.
I don't. Anyway, that's like that. We don't need to go too far.
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah.
The Shining.
Mhm.
The Shining.
So Kubrick, another backhanded quote, the novel is by no means a serious literary work, but the plot is extremely well worked out, and for a film, that's all that matters. Again,
Sure.
be nicer, Stan.
Yeah.
Just be like, you know what, I love the book. Like, why doesn't he just say that? It's really just the same sentence.
It's especially interesting because when the movie comes out,
I thought the book was great. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
no, but from the first screening, Stephen King's like, "Oh, fuck. They massacred my boy. And then proceeds to, like, for 5 years, be very polite about this
Right. The
movie.
griping was like a slow incline, like
Right.
very slow increase.
Whereas
Like,
Kubrick, when the movie's coming out, is like, I mean, obviously this novel's dog shit.
Right.
This guy can't fucking write his way up a paperback.
It's just very interesting, all the Kubrick quotes, which is funny considering that people are, unpack his movies in this way of like, what does it mean?
Mhm.
And he's instead just like, a story of the supernatural shouldn't be taken apart or analyzed closely. The whole test of its rationale is whether it's good enough to raise the hair on the back of your neck.
Right.
Like, which he's right. Like,
Every way he described this movie was just like, I really want to see how much I could scare people. It was an
this
interesting
movie-
challenge to
I
me.
bring up Casablanca all the time for this example because I showed Casablanca to my friends because I love Casablanca. Good movie. What do you guys
It's
think?
a great movie.
Great movie, yeah.
Ben's probably not seen it.
Is that the one where they're in Casablanca?
Yeah, exactly. And I remember showing it to my friends as a teenager. It's like a little budding cinephile.
Sure.
And them watching it and being like, that movie's corny. And I would be like, well, I mean, no, like every movie copied it. Like,
Right.
And like when you watch The Shining for the first time, literally there are little girls who say, come play with us forever and ever and ever. And you should be like, well, I've seen this a million times. Like, right? If you're in 2022 and you've never seen The
Yeah.
Shining, creepy little girls being, come play with us. Like, anyway. And yet it is still so scary.
But that's what
in
we were
this
talking
movie.
about, where you're like, how do you talk about this movie? And it's like, oh, you just watch it and
You just-
react to it. Because the
Right.
thing, you don't have to like create
The
a
caretaker
context
being like,
around
I
it.
had to correct them. Again, like just feel like that's
Yes.
cheesy and yet not at all when you watch the movie. You're so unsettled.
It's so good. While I was watching it this time, instead of thinking about those big things, those
Sure,
like
the-
those
the
sort of like
most
big
famous one, the
analytical
blood,
things, I
yeah.
found myself thinking about how the fuck did he make this so scary?
That's right.
And I feel like one thing that I noticed, and it happens a few times, is he waits a really long time. It happens a few times, I think 3 or 4 with Danny. The first time Danny sees the girls in the game room,
Mhm.
the tennis ball, and there's one other time where it kind of gets in on his face. Somebody sees something and he just doesn't fucking cut to show you what
Yes.
they're looking at.
I
And
love
the
that
first
shit.
time is in the game room. It goes into Danny, and he just holds on that kid. And you are like, show us what it is. It is maddening because you are fucking show me. I am so scared.
Right.
And when it turns, like, even just the technical things of like like a new horror filmmaker or somebody like maybe without the clout might do like a zoom in on the twins or on the two girls, but it's just he just kind of has them wide in that room, and it's like you are now inside Danny's head just seeing these two girls in the room.
The weird magic of the editing rhythms of this movie where you're like everything goes on for too long without being boring, and it somehow only makes you more on edge where you're like, can we please fucking hurry this up?
And
whether it's the terrifying image, whether it's the wind up for the terrifying image or a conversation, you're like, something's wrong here. Can we just get on with it?
One of my favorite scenes is the scene Tim, read for filth earlier and said was basically just like a fucking Netflix sketch. The bartender scene, because like it's Danny's in his weird caretaker outfit,
sure.
His like sweater thingy.
Yeah.
Everyone else is in like 1920s regalia. Joe Turkel, who recently died, right?
Very recently died.
Who's the bartender
just a few weeks ago.
who just has like a face like a fucking slab, like the most incredible Tombs face.
And is also a Tyrell and Blade Runner, right?
Love him.
Oh shit!
He's like so clipped and chill. And nothing happens in that scene except this weird exchange of dialogue that's so stilted. And you're just like, what the hell is going on the entire time? Like, or what's the turn that's about to come? Like what's the, and there's no jump. There's not really jumps in this movie, really, right? I mean, like, I guess Scatman getting axed is a bit of a
sure. Yeah.
But even that, when you're going up the hall, every one of those pillars, you're like, fuck, he's behind that one. And
right. You're pretty
and you're like, oh, fuck, he's
it.
behind the next one. And then he isn't.
Yeah. And also just the way the music works. It's not whatever. It's not how jump scares evolved. I don't know.
I think Scatman Crothers is kind of incredible in this movie. And it's an obvious like complaint. The people who like to ding this movie, and it's sort of rooted in King's analysis of what he thinks Kubrick missed or lost from the book. But like Kubrick's whole thing was he took all the emotion out of it. He's like such an icy clinical filmmaker. And he's like, literally the book ends with fire and the movie ends with ice. The guy seems crazy from the beginning. No one really feels like a human.
Right.
He made Nancy?
What?
Wendy. He made
Right.
Wendy into too much of like a victim from the beginning.
Yes.
All this sort of stuff, right? That's sort of like the push against it. I think Scatman Crothers has so much humanity
so
in
much
this
warmth with the
film.
kid and
it's like
later.
it's such a respite, that scene. Like every time I watch this movie and I get to the scene where he relates to Danny and talks about The Shining, I'm like, this is the only scene in this movie that makes me feel a little comfortable. And there's something about the fact that like talking about the whole dynamic between Wendy and Jack, the other piece that I think Shelley Duvall plays so well is like her undying love for this kid. And the understanding that she's sort of got to be with this guy. And the way that I think a lot of people who are in abusive relationships justify these things to themselves. It's like, I have to maintain this family dynamic for this kid. I have to try to fix this man for this kid. I can't ever truly hate him because he gave me this kid. And Jack has this resentment of his kid being weird, right? Like, why can't you be normal?
And Scatman Crothers, like, you think, like, going back to this idea of, like, Red Rum being this gigantic thing, like you think The Shining.
Yeah.
I had forgotten that Scatman Crothers is like, we called it The Shining because it's a positive thing.
Right,
You shine.
Yeah.
And it's like, here's the one person who knows how to talk to this kid. Wendy has so many levels of sort of self-justification and sort of what she chooses to accept in her reality or not, as much as she loves this kid. Scatman's able to talk to her, to Danny, so directly, so calmly, so confidently, and with such a true like warmth. There's that feeling of like when you see someone who really knows how to talk to a kid, not talk down to them, treat them as an equal, but with understanding of the delicacy of the thing. It's really impactful, and that it is like you shouldn't feel burdened by this. He's so goddamn good.
Tony's cool too.
Yeah, he's a cool guy.
Like, I like his voice.
Little finger guy, you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
What?
No, I was gonna say, do you know that Scatman Crothers was the voice of Hong Kong Phooey?
Really?
He's the voice of Hong Kong Fooey. He's Jazz, right?
Autobot Jazz?
Yes.
Yeah.
The Transformers.
Will you tell me, because I didn't look up a lot about it, what did Scatman Crothers do outside of this?
Well, he was
Hong Kong Fooey, Autobot Jazz.
Okay.
Well, he was like a big band leader and then singer. Like that's how he got famous. Like
Mhm.
initially he's like famous singer and performer. He's called the Scatman because
is about him.
well, yeah, he was a scat singer. Like he would do
That's
that,
what I assume.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It would be funny if he was just like, no, it's just
Just
his
like,
name.
no.
His real name is Benjamin.
Yeah.
Crothers.
It's like if there's a guy named Rock and Roll Tompkins, and they're like, "Why do you call him Rock and Roll Tompkins?" It's like that guy created rock and roll.
Right. He's in a
He was
he's
the
in a-
best at
I mean, he's in a zillion movies, but he had been in a bunch of Nicholson movies. He's in King of Marvin Gardens
sure.
and The Fortune
Yeah.
and Cuckoo's Nest. And so Nicholson recommends him for this.
Mhm.
And Nicholson apparently said to Kubrick, like, look, he's really good, but he will struggle with these lines, like to remember his lines. He's not that's not his forte. And apparently, that Scatman struggled with the Kubrick 80 takes
Right.
per shot thing. But Nicholson does say, like, Kubrick was never going to replace him. Like, there was
Yeah.
never any kind of tension like that. All right, so here's a Scatman quote. One scene, I get out of a snowcat and I walk across the street with no dialogue. 50 takes.
Yeah.
I really do wonder what you think as an actor when that's
I don't
happening.
know.
to you.
I think Kubrick, like, even with a very obviously emotional performance like Wendy in this, he finds a way to break his actors to a point where they all have that odd Kubrick vibe to them, And even Danny casting like a real kid. They had such an extensive search to find a kid who felt real,
Right.
but he exists on this Kubrick wavelength. And Scatman somehow avoids that, where you're like, he's from a different movie. He's from a warmer reality where people know how to relate to
And
each
when
other.
that one scene where he's on the phone at the airport,
Yeah.
you're weirdly chilled out all of a sudden.
That's the
Like,
thing.
oh my God, right.
Every
real
time he's on
people?
screen, every time you cut away to him, whether or not I think he's going to be able to save anyone or stop anything from happening.
I knew he would die because of Groundskeeper
course.
Willie. Like, I'd
Yeah.
seen the Simpsons episode before I saw this.
He
No offense.
has
to,
he
China.
strikes me as one of those guys who, like, everybody else on that set is going to show up and be like, oh wow, Stanley Kubrick. Okay, Stanley Kubrick. And he
Right.
strikes me as the kind of guy who's like, who the fuck's that?
Yeah.
Like, okay, all right, but I'm Scatman Crothers.
Right, I'm here to do my thing.
I'm here to do my thing. And he would be like, and maybe that's, I always admire people like that,
Yes.
that they're so willing to not worry.
There was this thing went around recently. This anecdote where the
Yeah.
movie he did after this was Bronco Billy, which is a Clint Eastwood movie.
Right.
And apparently, like,
Mr. Half
after
a Take.
months, that's the thing.
Right.
After months and months of Kubrick, he shows up to Bronco Billy. They shoot a shot. They do one scene, and Clint's like, "Great, move on." And Scatman says, like, he started crying because he was like, "Yeah, that was good," like
Yeah.
it's like the opposite. And so people are like, God, then the narrative, of course, just sort of rears up people.
PTSD.
Yeah, Kubrick was so awful, and like
right.
then
he broke Scatman.
JJ does link to a video here that I watched beforehand. That's why I clicked
Mm-hmm.
on it. Where like he seems very positive about doing this movie, having
Yeah.
done this movie.
Yeah.
It's not like he was like, what a nightmare. But I do think he was baffled by doing 180 takes of like listing
especially a guy
chickens
like him
and
who doesn't
fish.
come from like an acting background, and it's like
In this-
you're an interesting, charismatic figure. We should put you in movies, and his career like sort of grows and grows and grows and grows. But it's based on his understanding of his own naturalism and whatever. And then here's this guy who's like forcing him into rigid perfectionism. But it's like that's why it works, because he's coming from an entirely different. I mean, Shelley Duvall is also so fascinating on
We'll
this
talk about that in a
count
minute, right?
because
That's a
it's
whole
like
thing.
right. But I'm just saying in terms of background, like
Well, she had not really worked with another director.
yeah,
at all,
She's
right.
She's discovered for Brewster McCloud as
Yeah.
like a makeup tester at a mall, and the producer was just like, "Bobby, you got to come see this woman. She's the most fascinating human being I've ever witnessed."
That's how she ended up in this movie.
In Brewster
No,
McCloud, in her first
in,
movie.
like because like
Oh,
she does what 6 Altman movies in a row. It's
But it
Brewster,
was
McCabe, Thieves Like Us,
Right.
Nashville, Buffalo.
she was
Bill,
doing
Three
like
Women.
makeup demonstrations at a mall, and the producer went to Bob Altman and was like, "You got to see this woman." And they like have her audition, and they're like, I is this an act? Like, this is how she talks and how she moves, what she looks like and everything. Like, just the most bizarre energy. And he essentially like was just like, well, you can't act, but you're so fascinating. And then movie after movie, she starts to like really develop, where you get to the point of Three Women where you're like, this is like a fucking incredible performance. This is someone
She's
who
so good in
clearly
that
has come
movie.
into
But she
command
also
of-
does just have such magnificent natural energy
Right,
in
yes.
those movies. It's so cool. And then she is in Annie Hall, but like
Yes.
for a second.
That was her only,
That's her only
non
non-Altman.
Altman until then. And Altman's whole thing was like when he found somebody, he was like, "You only work for me. This is like my little mafia. I'll keep
And obviously he
rehiring."
made like a movie a year, so at least you were
Right.
working. But yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But like Bud Cort does MASH and Brewster back to back, and then gets offered Harold and Maude, and he goes to take that, and Altman's like, "Door closed. You're never welcome back."
What a fun chill guy.
Incredibly unchill guy. So like her taking this was a big ass deal because Altman was like, "Have fun." She's cast in Popeye against Altman's wishes. Like the
Insane that
studio's
he-
like, "You
like,
have to cast."
no
Shelley
one has ever
Duvall."
looked more like olive oil
Yeah.
as a human being.
And he's like, "I don't talk to her anymore."
Oh my god.
she's
Okay.
so good in Popeye. That might be like
That's her
one of
best
the
performance.
greatest performances.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But it's like, she's someone who sort of developed her own acting process purely through working with one director who had a very unique approach to actors over the course of a decade. Where you get to the point where three women, she like wins the best actress at Cannes, right? And people were just like, "Oh, this is someone who clearly knows what they're doing. This is not just an interesting energy anymore."
Everything that she does in this movie is incredible.
Yeah.
Even when when he's finally writing and she goes in to talk to him, like she has this way of keeping everything light, in that way of like, "Well, I just thought I'd come in and check on you," like in that way of like somebody who's like, "Well, I never know what I'm gonna get from this person."
Right. Just constantly dealing with a powder keg. Yeah.
And also like the sort, it feels like, especially like what we were talking about earlier, that scene where she's talking to the doctor who comes to the house looking for Danny, and she's telling the story about, it's like 100 other times you do this. It feels light, but also rehearsed, and it feels like she has gone through it enough times that it sounds true. But if you dig through it enough, you're like, "Oh no, this is an act." Like, it's a really amazing performance that she gives.
David?
Yep.
Fall weather may be upon us,
okay.
but for us hot sleepers, hot girl summer is sadly a year-round lifestyle.
A year-round lifestyle.
And that is the prompt that was given to us in this ad copy.
Look, it is a perpetual hot girl summer when it comes to David Sims.
I run hot. I don't know if you do as well.
I do.
I'm a big sweater.
Yes.
I'm like a fucking.
I like it cold in the.
I do
bedroom.
too. This
Yes.
I look. I don't want to get into your personal life. What happens behind closed doors, bedroom behavior between you and your wife. I've run into this problem with romantic partners, where even in the winter, I'm like, "Well, we're gonna sleep with the AC on, right?"
I'm the same, and I know sometimes this can be a bit of a binary
Of course.
thing and blah blah blah. And like I know some ladies run hot and some men run cold and all that, but I
men
run
from women, Venus from
hot
Mars.
AF.
Same.
And that's why I'd like to invest in the Marlow Pillow.
Yes,
from the
because
creators of Brooklyn Inn.
we love Rich and Vicky Fulop, but also, is there anything you love more than that cold side of the pillow when you flip it around, press your cheek against that cool
Nothing
side?
cooler than the other side of the pillow. And Marlow Pillow, it's a sub-brand from the sleep experts of Brooklyn, and
We love them,
they've got a lot of experience in the sleep space, of course.
of course.
They saw through customer feedback that people are struggling with pillows with overheating and confusion around firmness levels are some of the big concerns.
Very
So
particular.
they've been
about
working
pillow
on the
firmness.
Marlow Pillow.
Mhm.
It's a Goldilocks. It's got 2 unique zippers on each side to make customization a breeze.
They spent 7 years working on this. This wasn't some toss off.
Yeah, you can unzip them for a plush feel. You can zip them for a firm feel.
Love it.
They've got gel-infused chopped memory foam, chopped and screwed.
This sounds incredible.
Ventilated zipper gussets, breathable mesh. They use NASA technology for memory foam and polyester fiber fill, providing maximum comfort and support. And it's got a 365-day return policy.
Do you know what I'm going to do, David?
What?
I'm going to order myself some
I
Marlow
agree. I'm
pillows.
actually
This
gonna
ad
have to-
copy is really working
I
on
know.
me.
Yes.
They have not sent us samples.
No.
The next time we do a Marlow ad read, you're going to hear a personal testimonial because both of us are sold. This sounds like the solution to my problems.
No, listen to me. Don't sleep on these pillows.
Don't.
Best in your bed rest today by heading to marlowpillow.com. Bundle and save up to 40% on your purchase with an additional 10% off for first-time customers.
Rich
That's it.
and Vicky Fulop.
King's objections are known. So
Yeah,
I'll just
sure,
wrap that
sure, yeah.
with he has his quote, "It's a big, great Cadillac with no motor inside." Sounds spooky.
Mm.
Sounds like the premise of a Stephen King novel.
Yes.
And like you said, he has a sort of like, the book is hot, the movie is cold, you know,
Right.
ends in fire, ends in ice.
Kubrick hates emotions. He doesn't care to dig into these
and
things.
he has the complaint that many have lodged over the years of like, it's misogynistic. She's a shrew. She's a nag. Like, turns Wendy into this one-dimensional character, which I don't think is true. But
wow, I couldn't agree with.
Well, I think she's
disagree with that
one-dimensional in the way
more.
that every character in this movie is one-dimensional, which is not. But you know what I mean? Like, where you're like, well, Nicholson's crazy and she's scared. Like, it's just because their performances are so at
They're
the
very
surface.
primal.
Yeah. Anyway, obviously he co-wrote this movie with Diane Johnson, who's a very famous novelist before and after, and she obviously is a huge influence on the writing of the script.
Yeah.
And they like, she like moved to London, you know, and worked on this script with him for months. Like, it wasn't just some kind of like, she took a pass. There's a lot. I mean, look, we love you, JJ, but it's the longest dossier ever. I can't do it all.
Yeah. It's also just one of those things with The Shining where you're just like, if you start digging into the context too deeply, you're like, am I ever going to get out of this? The more I know, the more aware I become of what I don't know or haven't considered or whatever, you know? It's such an endless pool.
It's the thing you said, Kubrick's kind of complaint of like, he just puts everything into it. So they start pulling stuff out, the topiary animals that come to life. There's all these flashbacks. They remove all of that, like that are in the novel, things like that. Have you guys read that? Has anyone read The Shining apart from me? No?
I think
I read it when I was like the 6th grade. One of my bona fides for being on this is that I grew up in Maine.
That's true. You're a Mainer.
I'm a Mainer.
You're a Mainer.
Yes.
Right? Like, you can go back and they're like, you're still a Mainer, or are you excluded because you left?
No, I guess just because the cat had kittens in the oven, don't make them biscuits. My parents are from the Midwest. So
that's because that's what we have close family friends in Maine, and I guess it's the mom married the dad, and like the dad's a Mainer, and she's lived there for like 40 fucking years, and she's like, I'll never be a Mainer. Like, they'll never accept me. I'm from Ohio or whatever.
I mean, like, I was born at a hospital in Augusta, Maine.
Sure. The
I
capital.
grew up my entire life there.
Yeah.
Right.
207. But
that's
the area
Oh,
code.
sure.
That's the main area code. But no, I mean, like, I met a guy in Chicago, and I said, "Oh, it's like I'm from Maine." He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Yeah." He's, "Where were your parents born?" I was like,
Jesus Christ!
This
give me a break.
motherfucker.
Also, you left the siren call of the adrenochrome. You couldn't.
Yeah.
You couldn't resist.
The adrenochrome.
Yeah.
Kubrick casts Jack Nicholson, a famed actor. He had wanted him to play Napoleon in his Napoleon movie.
Which is wild.
Kind of unbelievable. Like, what the fuck is that movie? Nicholson is Napoleon?
Reading that, though, and Kubrick had some quote about, like, I think pretty much everyone in Hollywood wants Nicholson for every leading role. You're like, oh, Nicholson was kind of in that Adam Driver position where it's like,
why wouldn't you want this guy?
We have a leading man who is so unique and so interesting and also has become bankable. If you're a serious director with a difficult role, why wouldn't you pick this guy?
He actually is seen as a box office draw, but he's also like a top actor. Kubrick compares him to who he thinks are the two greatest stars, Spencer Tracy and Jimmy Cagney. So, and both of those make sense, where it's like, those guys are not like conventionally handsome.
Sure.
And they're not even necessarily like big, robust guys, but they are such good actors, and they were movie stars, like fuck off movie stars. Like,
yeah. And I think the thing he shares with Cagney is the like, why is this guy so watchable? Like, this guy can kind of make anything interesting. You know, and can play dark and can play light and funny and serious and anything. It's just like, oh, he can kind of sell an audience on anything. So the more difficult the material or the character, the more you're like, just give me Nicholson. Then the movie makes sense. Then I don't have to pitch it to people.
They both like the book. They talk about like, what do we want to keep? What do we want to? The thing they fight over is Nicholson wanted like the sexual element, like the sort of sexual repression, sexual violence element.
How surprising.
And he says, like, I think there's more for me to work with. I thought it would be really terrifying. And Stanley's answer was, it will be too terrifying.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Stanley was like, put your dick away for a second, Jack. Not everything's about fucking.
You know, the way Stanley put it, like, the murders have to be less sinister to keep the idea of the supernatural real. I don't really know what that means, but it does make a sort of sense anyway. Like, if you said that to me, I would be like, okay. Like, you know, I wouldn't really fight Kubrick on that.
I will say this too. I do think you talk about how few people die in this movie, especially for a movie where a guy's wielding an axe for over an hour straight. It feels like
an axe for a while.
Yeah,
there's a bat in there. You know, there's some weapons.
There is a certain catharsis, weirdly, to a killing on screen, right? Where like if you see Michael Myers stab somebody, tension's released out of the balloon for a little bit because you're like, well, at least it's probably 5 minutes until that happens
That's
again.
exactly what it is.
You
You're
can
like,
sort of set your watch
piece
to it.
over,
Right.
and now
The movie's
great.
got to dip for a moment.
Because the whole
Yeah.
thing with a slasher movie is like, if he's going to kill someone else, we're going to have to meet them,
Yes.
figure out where they are,
Right.
and then we're going to get going. Like,
Right.
you know, even if we've met the character before, we're going to need to be like, okay, this character's in a fun house, and like,
Right.
you know, whatever.
Like, in the same way, it's like, if you're never letting this guy fuck, and you're kind of never letting him swing the axe at people, you know, and making impact, then it's just building and building and building and building. You looked like you had something you wanted to say.
Yeah,
No. I just really enjoyed your like, oh, they're in a fun house.
Sure.
I really enjoyed
Yeah.
that.
Michael
Yeah.
Myers is in a fun house. Nicholson says the scene where he's writing
Mhm.
and he unloads on her. you know,
Right.
the
That was
typewriter.
his suggestion.
Yeah, he's
Right.
like, that's like me when I got my divorce.
Yeah.
And you know, under the pressure of like being a family guy and like I don't know, like he talks about that.
You know what I think is so good about that scene? It's like the torturous relationship to writing,
Mhm.
where you're like, well, first of all, the reason I can't write is one problem. And if I fix that one problem, then floodgates are going to open and this won't be a torturous process to me. Oh, the problem is I'm around too many people. I got to move to a empty hotel, top of a mountain, and then it will flow, baby. Right? Like there's the amount of times I've told myself like, oh, the problem is I don't like physically writing. If I get a text to speech headset, then I'll write fucking 4 novels a week or whatever it is. Right?
And I love that, like, all of that is present in that first scene where he's
First-
like, well, I'm working on an outline of a new
Right.
story. And it's
Right.
like, oh, no.
an
You're
outline,
not.
great.
Yes. Outline.
You're gonna crush this living alone in a cavernous hotel.
He's
Yeah.
so committed to this idea of like, I gotta take a big swing to solve the writer's block, you know, to just loosen everything up. But also, when he spills on his like, you don't understand the pressure keeping this family, whatever. So much of it is like, I can't write because I'm so busy with this family. That's the problem. And when she comes in and quote unquote disrupts him,
Yeah.
it's that thing where you're like, I'm looking for there to be an outside thing I can blame this
yeah,
on.
you can displace all this onto. Right. 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I was going to be writing for the next 10 hours.
Yeah,
And now you've broken the flow.
It's addiction too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my big read. I mean, and it's obvious, but like him not having alcohol for 5 months and now locked in a space with basically the cause of it, which is his wife and his kid. I mean, that behavior, that reaction, that like you it's like subconscious when you're an addict. Like you just lash out at anyone around you because you just want the thing.
You're the thing that's stopping me
making
from
you
getting
feel
the thing
empty.
I want.
But it's
or
also the
whatever.
same line of thinking where it's like, okay, how do I kick the bottle? Seclude myself in a mountain.
Right. Keep
If I
myself away
don't
from
have
bottles.
access to alcohol, then I'll be fine. Then if I can't, then I will be okay. And it's like, no, you're going to go nuts.
Yeah. So Ben, you said you would take this job though. So is it like the simple plan where you were like, if I'd found that money, I would have kept it and used it wisely.
Yeah.
Here you're like, if I had gone to that hotel, I would have written a great novel and not.
The guy
not
comes
freaked out.
back, hotel spick and span.
Binge
I would have
drinking
married a
gas
novel,
fires.
finished,
I would have been eating fucking racks of fucking ribs. I would have had a good
dining out like a
time.
king.
Yeah, man.
You and
Ben's watching
Pig.
this movie, like jotting down recipe ideas as Scatman's going through the dry story.
He went to Indeed.com looking for people.
Like canned peaches. Oh man, get some ice cream. That would be a delicious little dessert.
How long I think I could do a week and then I would have to go. I think about a week is what I can imagine doing. Just like you can't fucking leave. You're just in this empty hotel.
I was an only child, so I think I could do a solid 2 months.
I'm not kidding. I had
No, you
stomach
would, like, do
problems
48 hours.
yesterday, and by the end of the day, staying in bed, I felt like I was losing my mind. I think it is the pathway, though. What you're saying of
Yeah,
like
it's just been opened up and you just
right,
like you
post
tumble down that
pandemic,
hole.
it takes an hour alone. I start to go like, well, do I ever leave?
All right.
Yeah.
There was the moment where he's throwing the tennis ball against the wall. Like it starts on the typewriter with nothing on the page, and then it pans out and he's throwing the tennis ball against the wall. I'm like, oh man.
Yeah.
I've been there, buddy.
Yeah, get it.
Like
Yeah.
there was something very relatable and great about that. Even though it was about him beginning to go crazy.
Mhm.
I was just like on like the writerly part being like, yeah, man. Yeah, do it.
Yeah, actually, 2 months seems like a long time.
Yeah.
That's
I
a
can't do
lot of
that.
time, my friend.
All right, I'll scale it back.
Yeah,
maybe
You get
2
Netflix in
weeks.
this world.
Oh, okay.
Big difference.
Just Netflix.
Also, Ben, you wouldn't need that
You
much
know
time.
what? I had Netflix when I was in those hotels, and I
Didn't
still
help.
went fucking.
Oh yeah, no,
Insane.
I don't
Yeah.
think it really would help.
No.
No.
But Ben, you wouldn't need that much time because you'd finish the novel in like 3 days.
Oh, easy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no.
It would be funny if this movie it's like day 3 and he's like, novel done,
Yeah.
and then he goes crazy. It'd just be funny if he actually wrote the novel.
Or
Do you know
no, he
what's-
has to start editing it. Then he goes
that's
crazy.
It's also it's interesting that this comes from Stephen King, who I think is thought of as like a faucet.
Yeah, right. He just writes and writes and writes and writes.
Right.
Yeah,
and like
totally,
Kubrick's complaint is like, well, he puts every idea in the book. But it is the benefit of that is like he writes 4 books a year. Like
Yeah,
he
that's
just
the thing.
takes whatever he's feeling at that moment.
He talks about writer's block, and
Yeah.
he said he's had it, and I'm
Yeah.
sure he has. But then also, you're like, your writer's block must be very short and intense because
Yeah.
you do produce so much.
Well, and I think he was like struggling to come up with a concept for The Shining or for his next book before this.
Well,
And he
saw
talks about
something
like
shiny, and he was like, I don't know, what am I going to do
Shining?
with this?
Um, no, but I saw quotes from him where he was sort of like, I went on vacation and then I was in this abandoned hotel and then there weren't that many people there and the hallway started to scare me. Like it was truly like a 12-hour process where he
He's
like
good at
woke
that
up the
shit.
next morning and was like, I think I got the whole book in my head. And then he starts
That's
writing.
what he's good. I mean, that's the same with Pet Cemetery. It was
Yeah.
like a truck almost ran my kid over, and I was like, all right. And then I wrote a novel.
Right.
And showed it to his wife, and his wife was like, "This is the most fucked up thing you've ever written. What the hell is going on with you?" Pet Cemetery is my favorite.
I saw some interview with him recently where it was him in sort of conversation with another writer, and I
Sure.
forget who it was.
Yeah.
On stage, and he was asking him like, how do you fucking do it this much? And he's like, well, I just think my books tend to be about 500, 600 pages long, and I just commit to writing 10 pages a day. So
Sure.
that means you pretty much get it done in 2 months.
Yeah, I mean,
And they were like, and you just open up the laptop and you successfully get 10 pages done every day? And he's like, yeah, pretty much.
he's like, I don't use a laptop. Write it by hand.
Well,
No,
sure.
I don't know how
Sure,
he writes.
whatever. It is.
Um,
Yeah.
And he
Just
must
as
use-
another shout out to Maine.
Who?
To Maine.
Oh,
State.
Maine. Shout
The-
out Maine.
The state generally.
Sure.
What's this like? It's the what state? You know how like it's like, oh, the nutmeg state or whatever. Like, does Maine have
we're
a
the Pine Tree State.
pine tree state?
Wow.
Oh.
So there is a certain New Englandy work ethic that speaks to of like, I think everybody there would have a hard time being an artist. And so it makes sense that he's like, I just get up and write.
He's
Yeah.
like, right. It's work.
I'm not
It's
precious
yeah,
about
yeah,
this.
yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I
Sit,
woke
I
up
work.
and just like every other person that lives here, I did my work. And at the end of the day, I was done doing
If
my
I'm a writer, it is my job to write every day.
Yeah.
I'm not going to question whether Dreamcatcher is insane.
Yeah.
I'm just
Well,
going to
he-
finish writing
He
Dreamcatcher.
has said about Dream. That's the Goofballs book where he
Sure.
was like, I do not remember writing.
Right,
that.
right.
I was 100% on painkillers the entire time. Nothing about that book, of course, suggests that at all. Very
No,
chill book.
no.
And we talked about this on the Kingcast, but you
Yep.
know what the original title of that book was?
Butt weasels?
Cancer.
Oh,
And,
boy.
and like his like man agent was like, that's a bummer. And also this book isn't about cancer.
I don't know. I feel like him.
He was like,
Yeah.
Anyway, Shelley Duvall.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kubrick casts her. Both Nicholson and Kubrick sort of talk about her in the same way that feels like mildly insulting, but you know what they mean, where Kubrick's like, you can't have Jane Fonda play this part. You need
Right.
someone who's mousy and vulnerable and eccentric. And Nicholson talks about
kind
it
of
too.
wanted Jessica Lange, who makes more sense because,
Who he-
especially at this time, she's so fragile.
He does
emotionally
Postman
in those early
with
roles,
her
right.
the next year, which
Yeah.
is a bad movie. in
But
my opinion.
she was a very delicate actress, despite being very poised
Sure.
at the early run. I
but,
think the
like,
first 10 years or so.
They
Yeah.
both sort of have this thing of like, we need to like in the book, she's a much more self-possessed person, but you're like, why is she still putting up with him? We
Yeah.
wanted someone who felt a little more vulnerable, or what, like that's the sort of logic of casting someone like Shelley Duvall. I
They also
guess.
talk about that thing where it's like the fact that she's not a trained actor, she didn't have all these weird behavioral tics taught out of her. There's something she does things on screen, the way she moves her body, the way she holds herself, her energy is just stuff that like she's completely unique. She just sort of vibrates in every moment.
I think she's such an incredible actress. I mean, I think like the whole conversation around her has gotten tied up in the fact that she had like mental problems later in life, and like
Yes.
people sort of connected the dot of like, well, The Shining like ruined her,
Right.
which is like not true.
Yes.
Like, and she's very clear that that's not true. And but like, it's, you know, there's that one interview. What was it? Was it Dr. Phil?
Yes.
That's like devastating to watch, where you're like,
Yeah.
she shouldn't be in front of a camera.
Right,
It's from like
right.
a few years ago.
Dr. Phil, very exploitative man.
Right. He
Yeah.
used to be very pro Phil.
I went through a period where I was finding it very cathartic to
Therapeutic,
watch
yes.
Dr. Phil yell at
It
families.
was 2016. Like, it was just one of those things
Yes.
where it was clearly like, turn the cameras off. Like, she's not ready for this, like,
Yes.
or whatever. And like, she did that Hollywood Reporter interview a couple, like last
Yeah,
year.
which was
where
good.
It
actually.
felt a little
Yeah.
more like, okay, she sort of found her piece a little bit.
Right.
But like, there's no question that making this movie was an absolute nightmare for her. Like, and
Yes.
one of the biggest things that Nicholson talks about that's interesting is like, he's like, we all lived in London. We all rented places in London, and she rented a place in Elstree, which is, you know, north of London, where where the studio is, and like never fucking went into the city
Yeah.
because she was like so in it. All right, shut up. And he was
Why?
like,
how do you know geography?
I'm a little bit
yeah,
confused.
Elstree is actually like a later stop on the Thames Link, which is what I took to school every day.
Well,
So
but I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, hold
You,
on, hold on.
you
on.
took the subway.
no, not this. It was the Thames Link, not somewhere.
But that's a really long train ride to go into New York City.
It would be funny if
For
it went all
school
the way.
every day? What's the turnaround time?
I took Thames Link from Kentish Town to Blackfriars, guys. Hit me up any other Thames Link riders.
Those are such strange names for MTA.
Right, I'm like, what line is that? 2-3?
I'm so sorry. Like, you're a guest on our show.
This
and
is just
here's
so
David. Just
This
like,
feels like some Kubrick-esque.
I
Like,
remember-
is there a mystery he's
my
waiting for
my,
us to
my
solve?
college roommate was Irish. He was from Northern Ireland, and when he came to visit me the first time in London, where I lived for 13 years.
What?
Yeah, I lived in Kentish Town, and he was like, "That's such a funny name," and I was like, "Why is that? What do you mean?" And he's like, it's like not Kent, Kentish. Like, I was like,
It's like if there was New Yorkish city.
where someone's like, "This place is like a lot like Kent." The guy's like, "Nah, relax.
it's okay.
It's not.
It's
Kent.
Kentish.
It's Kentish."
Yeah.
Anyway,
I just as absolutely as a side note, and David, I think you're going to appreciate this.
please.
As the podcast has gotten bigger, you know, and it feels like people are really starting to listen.
Yeah, I described it as unwieldy, but go on.
Unwieldy.
Good call.
Griffin, you've gone fucking soft on the bits. You've let David get in your head.
I
And you know what? Fuck him.
You thought I was going to enjoy this?
like this. I like this. I like this. I like this. Yeah.
I am. You fucking do you.
I
You
love
fucking do
this.
you.
No. On
Do
the
the
leash.
bit.
Wait a second.
You've been. Don't let
I've been
it.
giving him a break because he's got the kid at home.
You went
He's
soft.
sleeping less.
You went fucking soft.
No, I admit it. I
You're
admit it.
trying. You're kowtowing to David.
I know.
And I reply, I think you
Jack
stopped doing it
Torrance
'cause it
over
was
here. I
getting
don't want to
boring.
lash out at me. You think what?
That you stopped doing it just because it was getting incredibly boring.
No, I think this is exactly the kind of like,
And, people on
lifeblood
the Reddit would be
infusion
like,
the
wait,
bits
why do
needed.
they? I'm a new listener. What is this?
If I met you right now,
Yeah.
I would never believe that you would be the kind of guy to do a weekly podcast about the movie Blank Check.
Right.
Mm.
But
And
at that
I just want to know what you're putting out into the world right,
right,
now. If
Right.
you
Today you'd be
don't
like,
wanna
this
be that-
pussy
Huh?
would never, ever do something that punishing.
No.
He would never commit to a bit that hard.
It's yeah. Anyway, she lived in Elstree.
How would you know that?
So
It would
wait,
be
wait.
like
Sorry,
if-
I
to
did
give you
derail
a
that.
clear example, like a New Yorkie example. It would be like if you fucking like we're shooting a movie in like even beyond Westchester, like Rockland County, and
It's
rather
like if you were holed up at a hotel in Beachwood, Ohio, while everyone else was
100%,
yucking it.
like, okay, that. How long was like the car ride from your hotel to the set?
It was the car ride to the hotel. The set was very short.
Oh,
The
We
car
were
ride to the-
closer to the
So that-
location.
okay, that helps because like
Yeah.
basically it's like Nicholson is like, look, we took the 2-hour car ride,
Right.
but it's worth it. It's a year and a half making this fucking movie because it's
Yeah.
a Stanley Kubrick movie. You live in London, you can go home.
No, we
and
were
be in a
we were in
city.
that position. Like Kevin
Yeah.
Costner was like hour plus car ride, and we were like 15 minutes from
Yeah.
location, but
So
with
you
nothing
were doing
around.
the Shelley
us.
Duvall, but of course,
Yes.
like, how long does draft day take to make? I don't know how long.
We
was
were
it?
out there
4
6
years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
4 weeks,
no.
6
We
weeks.
had 6 weeks
Right.
of real filming.
She
Our
lived-
section of the movie.
She lived in Elstree for 18 months.
Yeah, but also,
Like,
and
it's-
Shelley Duvall didn't have a Tim Simons to keep her sane.
Yes, there wasn't
Where
a Cedar
were you?
Rapids.
Yes.
You were 2 years old, 3. I don't know.
Sure.
At the time, you could have been helping.
So I would say, like, I had an experience. I was filming something
Mhm.
in New Orleans, but if you know New Orleans, it was like on the other side of Lake Pontchartrain,
Sure.
which would be like staying in L Street,
Sure.
wherever that place
Yeah,
is.
yeah. Way the fuck out.
And it's not something I'll ever do again.
Mhm.
That thing, like it wasn't for a year and a half, but that thing you're talking about rings true. Just because if you are that isolated from everything, it wears on you, and I wouldn't make that choice again.
Right. Angelica Houston talks, who she's dating Nicholson at the time. She talks about, like, I would see Shelley having a hard time. She's like an outside observer.
Yeah.
She's not there all the time. But she's like, I may have been misreading this, but it kind of felt like the boys were ganging up on her. Like, it's like
Sure.
Kubrick and Nicholson, these old hands, and she's like much more inexperienced with a production like
There's
this.
always been this, and look, I don't think it's exclusive to this movie, this dynamic, these actors and director, but this is sort of an example. It perfectly kind of exemplifies this thing that you hear about sometimes, where it's just like it is assumed the man can act, and is assumed that the director has to trick the performance out of the woman. You know, and I
sure,
think
right?
this
Yeah,
is
sure.
tied to this sort
Like,
of
why
very-
don't we like psychologically get
Right.
her to?
Yeah.
And also, like, she's fucking sobbing and screaming for so much of this
Well,
movie.
this is the bigger
Doing
thing.
that
I want to
endlessly.
put a pin in that. I'm going to get back to that in 1 second.
Yeah,
But I do think there's that thing, and I think it's tied to sort of this, like, the way that method acting is mythologized with this certain type of leading man,
Yeah.
right? And these men who punish themselves, but have the strength to create the circumstances for themselves, put them, set them up for themselves, give the performance, take themselves out of it, survive, right?
Mhm.
Whereas, like, women are not really given the cultural leeway to talk about what they put themselves through for a performance, but I also think they don't feel this sort of need to make acting feel tough in that way.
Yeah.
I think it's very much this sort of like masculine overcompensation of what can be seen as a dainty job of like, I have to make this torturous.
sure, right.
Whereas like when you hear interviews with the best female actors of any era, they're all like, you just do the work. It's more studious, it's more academic, you know? But like all the best actors sort of just talk about like Meryl Streep. I mean, there's the anecdote I always think about when Meryl Streep's on the set of Doubt. And Meryl Streep is by all accounts someone who just turns it on, turns it off.
Right.
Right? And she's in the scene with Philip Seymour Hoffman. He's like pacing back and forth and like punching himself in the head and like digging his nails into his leg. And she just is going like, you don't need to do it, Phil. You don't need to do all that. I'm telling you.
And of course, she's so good in that movie.
The point is,
Pow! Kapow! Got her.
Jesus,
Sorry.
Meryl Streep dead on the floor. You
Little
conjured
bit.
her out of the air
Little
just
bit.
to murder her in
Little
Ben's
bit.
apartment.
A little bit.
So there's that whole thing, right? And then the other part of it is I was reading, I think it was in the dossier, but some quotes from Shelley Duvall in the making of the film, which just because the production is so fucking long,
Yes.
I think they'd originally told her it was going to be 12 weeks and then it was like 18 months, right? But she said
Fun.
like, there's a lot of crying in 3 Women. She was like, I think that's why he hired me, because I had this extended sort of
Yes.
emotional breakdown at the end of that movie that showed him that I could do that sustained for a longer period of time, whatever. 18 months is a different story. And she sort of was like, look, there's a certain point in time, and it goes almost back to what you're saying, Tim, about like the heat stroke thing, right? Where it's like, whatever tricks you have to get your body into that state, your mind into that state. I have a playlist, sad music. I'm listening to it on a Walkman, whatever, right? She's like, at a certain point, your body doesn't enjoy that. And it starts to go like, I'm not falling for
I'll
that
give you
yet.
the quote. By
Please.
after a while, your body rebels. It just says, stop doing this to me. I don't want to cry every day.
Right.
And the thought alone would start to make me cry. Waking up on a Monday so early and realizing I'm crying all day. Like that's the
Right.
schedule.
Right.
I would just start crying. And I would be like, I don't know how to do it. I can't. And yet I did it. I don't know how I did it. Jack said that to me too. He said, I don't know how you do this.
It's this weird thing of like all the tricks you have to be able to do it in your own control start to go away because your basic survival mechanisms start to rebel against
Yeah.
the way you're fucking with yourself. And she would say, like, I would actually, by the end of the day, I would find myself feeling very relaxed because it was like sort of, I've exercised
Like
everything
purging
from
or
my
whatever.
system.
Yeah,
But it's really hard to get there, and it's harder to get there the longer the shoot goes on. And then it is this weird thing where it's like, oh, the thing that gets her to cry is the fear of needing to cry, which then becomes a very unhealthy cycle.
Yeah. I will say that like I had not read that quote, but even as like in the same way that when I watch a movie that like when they're shooting out in the cold, I'm like, oh, everybody was cold that day.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm watching this movie and watching her performance. And I'm not saying this to take away from Jack Nicholson's. Jack Nicholson's is very good, is incredible.
Yeah.
But I look at that, I'm like, okay, he's doing it. And I look at her and I say, I don't know
Right.
how
Did
she
you pull
is
this
doing
off?
this.
Right.
It's so hard to do for such a long time.
Nicholson's performance is also like iconic, and I mean that in like he feels like an icon, or
Yeah.
you know, like whereas she's giving this just like insanely emotional performance. Not
Yeah.
they're very very different. I don't know. She's really good. Everyone's good in this movie.
I agreed. The think you should leave thing, right?
Yeah.
I went down a rabbit hole watching Robert Duvall interviews recently. One of the best to ever do it. Now one of our last sort of living elder statesmen of that.
I mean,
era.
don't even fucking bring him up because you'll probably
It's
die.
worrying.
Yeah.
It's worrying, especially with the way we've been losing a lot of the greats recently.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. Someone was like, "I can't believe all these guys are dying." I'm like, "They're all like, what
I know.
are we supposed to
I know.
do about it?"
I know. It just we're like getting to a generation
Yeah,
of
man.
more celebrities existed, which means more iconic people are able to
Yes.
die in greater
That's
numbers.
part of it, and then it's also
There used to be fewer movie stars.
Yeah, no,
right.
you're right. Go on.
But
I don't know how to tell everybody this. Everyone that created something you liked will die.
they will die at some point.
will die.
Yeah, yeah. And if you're lucky, you die before them. You don't have to grieve them.
All right, make your point.
Colbert did an extended like Robert Duvall episode sometime last year where he
Okay.
like went to his fucking ranch in Montana and talked to him for like 30 minutes.
That's
right?
cool.
It's really cool. And Colbert just kind of keeps on pushing him, going like, okay, but how do you act so well? And he's like, I don't know. I read the script and then I say the things. And he's like, but what's your process? He's like, I don't know. I just act. Like, he's one of those guys who's very unfussy about it. And he sort of says like, but what is the secret? Like, what makes you so good? And Duvall puts it this way that it's just been ringing in my head, but it kind of nails it, where he's just like, it's about understanding your basic temperament. Like, who are you? What is your temperament? What are you feeling that day? And not allowing yourself to reach outside of that. So whatever is on the page that you have to find a way to dramatically depict that day, you don't want to push for something outside of where you're feeling at that moment. You want to find a way to do the best version with the emotion you have in you at that point.
Mhm.
And a thing that I think links Tim Robinson and Jack Nicholson is they're two guys who can go so fucking big, have these crazy outbursts, but it never feels like they're pushing. It somehow feels like that's within their basic
How are we still talking about
temperament.
Tim Robbins?
No, because it is this thing when you're talking about like, does it ruin this performance, right? I
Yeah.
think the unified thing, and Tim Robinson uses it for comedy, but that with Nicholson, you're just like, he's able to go fucking humongous, and you never feel like this guy's overacting. You're like, somehow he has this access to like
Yes.
mania in a second. And there was a clip from the Vivian Kubrick documentary,
Mm.
which is one of the things that people study to go like, were they torturing Shelley Duvall?
Right.
But there's a moment where he's there with his script and he's like sort of underlining just his character name on his lines with like a check mark. And he goes like, I stole this from Boris Karloff. I saw that Karloff used to mark his lines this way, and I started doing it. And then the camera pans up, and he's like, and much like Karloff, I can go mad at any second. And you're just like, oh, he literally can just...
Like, turn that on.
Right, and it doesn't feel like goofy.
Yeah. No, it doesn't.
Right. And it is that thing with him where you're just like, oh, he had this very broad canvas and could go bigger than most actors could without it ever feeling like a push. Like it was outside of his basic temperament.
What's
Yeah.
your point?
The
Ben?
fucking making of. There's a whole bit with him brushing his teeth in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Right before going to set, and then that day, right when they're shooting that little moment, he then goes and grabs an axe and starts swinging it at a
Yeah.
fucking door, and is like, he just goes from like a normal funny guy to being so fucking
yeah.
unhinged.
He famously like broke the door down more than they thought he
Right.
could, like because he used to be a fireman as well. I think he knew what he was doing.
There's the
Yeah.
story too that like on A Few Good Men, he did every single take of the "You Can't Handle the Truth" scene, where there's like coverage of 15 different
Right. He
people in that
always
courtroom.
was sitting in the in the court martial.
He did off camera for everyone's like fucking takes, and he did full energy every time. And Rob Reiner would go up to him and go like, Jack, very generous, kind of you, but you don't need to do that for like fucking Demi Moore's coverage. It's fine. And he'd just go like, I love acting. Like he was just like, this is the good part,
He's
you
getting
know?
that
I
scene.
enjoy this. Like he's one of those
Hot
guys who
take.
just seem to have kind of endless energy, never got tired of doing the thing. I mean, you hear the stories about like when Bob Rafelson was writing Head with him,
Mhm.
another recently departed legend,
Rip.
where he thought like, I'm going to be more of a writer-director, maybe I'll act a little bit. And as they were writing the script, Nicholson would like get up and act out every part, and he'd be like, why the fuck is this guy a movie star? Like anything
Yeah.
he starts embodying, he'd do an impression of a dog, and I'd be like, this guy's so fucking compelling. You know, where it's like you can give him a role like this, where it's like, by the way, at the end, all bets are off, nothing's too big. And it remains somehow a little bit grounded.
It really, I think your point is a good one, that like when Tim Robinson does the thing where he like tilts his head 90 degrees and
Right.
starts going, do you really think that that's, you actually believe that is what
That's the thing.
how
That's
he
the
would-
magic. And
I agree with that, but I am now calling. We will not talk about Tim Robinson anymore. We've not discussed
Okay.
The Shining enough.
Tim
and I am
Robinson, the
taking Tim
Jack Nicholson
Robinson
of his
out.
generation.
No, I'm retiring him. His number's getting pulled up to the ref.
Jesus.
The
Within
last
the
coffin
episode.
has flopped. We are moving on.
Wow.
He's done. We can't keep. Someone's eventually going to send it to him, being like, "Do you realize you're compared to Nicholson for like 25 minutes in this
The memes,
podcast?"
the Reddit's gonna go fucking wild on this one. Either
Yes.
putting like Nicholson photos with "I don't want to be around
Right,
anymore."
This is why I was almost worried to bring it up, because I
know.
don't want to. Anyway.
Yeah.
Um,
Anyway.
All right, The Shining.
The Shining.
We've obviously been talking about The Shining.
Obviously.
Yeah.
I
I mean, maybe do we talk about Danny a little
here's,
bit?
Here's the thing I want to say.
I don't know.
This is the thing I want to say because it gets into this whole. Maybe mention what happens in the movie.
Yeah, you know, we could do that. I
Can
don't
we
know.
talk about Scatman Crothers? Kubrick's a little bit of fucking freaky deaky, because he fucking puts, like, as you go in Scatman Crothers' Miami apartment,
Mhm.
Sure.
you have like the naked woman picture above
Yeah,
his
yeah,
TV.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then in the reverse shot, there's another fucking giant naked woman picture
Yeah.
above him.
Yeah.
Well, this guy's a fucking hound dog.
I
He's a
mean,
hound dog.
He's having fun.
Yeah, he
He's
likes
got a good energy.
He's having a good time. No, thing I want to say about Danny. I guess talk about this whole thing of
The
like
actor's called Danny Lloyd, and it's basically the only thing he ever
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
he makes a cameo in Doctor Sleep.
He does. Yeah. He's like, but like,
He's in the
he's like
stands
in
of
a
the baseball game or
Exactly,
whatever. Right.
yeah.
I think it's the Jacob Tremblay scene. Jacob Tremblay, another actor who, by all accounts, can kind of just turn it on, turn it off.
He's incredible in Doctor Sleep. Like,
Yeah, incredible.
You ever worked with Trems?
No, never worked with Trems.
One day I want someone to give me a Trems anecdote.
I know.
Go on. What were you gonna say about Danny? Danny, I struggle with kid actors. I just with this kind
Yeah.
of kid actor where it's like, it's not like he went on to become a grown-up actor and you're like, oh, how interesting. You're just like, what an interesting, they did a great job conjuring a performance out of a kid.
No,
Like,
this is what
who's
I
got a great look.
This
you
is
know?
what I was going to say, because the whole conversation of like Kubrick breaking people, does he have to force these performances out? What is it? He was very adamant that like this kid did not know he was in a horror movie.
They talk about that a lot, right?
We
The
built
kid-
this like it was a drama.
right.
I like found ways to get the shots I needed out of him without ever submitting him to the reality of this film.
Right.
They were like very protective of this kid.
Yeah, totally.
And then this kid seemingly had good parents, and they were like, "You're not going to do this for the rest of your life."
Great.
Yeah.
I say this as a joke, but I actually kind of mean it. I don't think children should be allowed to do this.
Yeah.
I think that you should have to play. Babies should be played by 18-year-old people.
You're just, and I know what you mean. Like, it's
Yeah.
just like child acting is just kind of inherently exploitative, no matter how
Yes.
much
Yeah.
control you put
Yes.
on it.
Even
Yes.
in the best circumstances,
Yeah.
it's not a great idea.
I also think, like, at the very least, my thought has always been, you get to do one.
Yeah.
If you're a kid, you do one job, and then you got to move on.
Right. We can't.
The second it
reuse-
becomes a career,
can't become-
and you're
right,
spending
yeah.
too much time in this adult world and
Yeah.
all of that.
What's his dude that show ran Sons of Anarchy and is writer on the Shield?
Kurt Sutter.
Kurt Sutter.
Yeah.
He talked about like his kids were like they were like
Yeah.
what if your kids want to go in, because I think he's married to Katie Siegel.
Yes.
And they have kids together, and he was like, yeah, they can absolutely act if they want. They're in a high school, they can do high school plays.
Yeah.
But they're
Right.
not
They're not.
stepping on a set until
Right.
they are legal adults and they can make that choice.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is like this is a happy story where it's like, here's a kid who gives a great performance, an iconic film.
Yes.
Everyone on the crew in the making of the film went out of their way to not let this traumatize him. And then he pretty much retired, and he's a school teacher, and he's very happy.
And he's great in this movie.
He is.
He's
It's just
great.
very natural, and like there's just something about the way his face those reaction shots they get out of
He's
him.
a little sickly. Like they put a little, I think, like rouge under his eyes or something.
Yeah.
It's just like he's got a little.
David's doing the face.
To do Danny. I mean, the big wheel scenes are just like my favorite. It's like I could just watch that for hours.
It's unbelievable.
It's
sort
truly
of hypnotic
hypnotizing.
thing of the carpet, and then you need the wood floor.
Yes,
and
the carpet and the I love it.
So when I was looking at the special features, there was a commentary with people who worked behind the scenes,
like
camera
the
operators, and
Steadicam
it said
operators.
the inventor of
Yeah.
the Steadicam.
His
This
name
was
is
early
Garrett Brown.
enough in the run of the Steadicam.
To give you I'll give you the Steadicam research because it is important, right? Like
Bound for Glory is the first one, right?
correct. That's the first time it's used. And Kubrick, I guess, had been sent a demo reel, like even before then, and writes a long letter back, being like with lots of questions, where he's like, "You need to." He actually gave notes on the reel where he's like, "You can see a shadow of the person using it, and it's going to give it away. So, to protect your patent, you should delete that from your reel."
Wow.
And he also is like, "Is there a minimum height at which it can be used?" He has like lots of questions.
Yeah.
And he calls it like a magic carpet, which is really cool. I think that's a really fun way to, describe it. And Garrett Brown, who invented it, operates the camera for all the Steadicam shots. Like John Alcott's the DP of this movie, but who works on other Kubricks. But like that's all Garrett Brown. And it just sounds really cool. Like, I mean, what Garrett Brown says about him?
What?
Really demanding lots of takes. 50 to 70 takes of, going down a fucking hallway. I mean,
there's that amazing.
People have talked about it for a million years. The Steadicam's really important. It's kind of like a character in the movie. Like, what about like? It's so hard to talk about shit like this.
No, it is. It is. There's the moment that I think is pretty directly lifted from this, even though it looks different in.
You better not bring up. I think you should leave.
In that episode of Key and Peele.
Which episode?
No, in Zodiac.
Yeah.
It's one of the killings. It's like the car killing where you have that extended overhead shot that I think is done entirely in CGI. But Fincher steals that move of like when the car turns a corner, the camera somehow turns with the car remaining perfectly placed in the center of the frame.
Yeah.
And it does make you feel like, oh, there's like some sort of uneasy, otherworldly presence.
Right,
which I think is really taken from this, where it's like the speed at which the camera is able to adjust every time he turns a corner and he remains perfectly centered in the frame makes you feel uneasy. And the other thing is like the difference between the carpet and the wood. It's that thing where when you're a kid and you're able to like let your mind run off of so little, you can just start imagining, where you're just like, oh, this game of the difference of the sound, right? How much carpet do I have left before I hit wood, and how different does the wood sound than the carpet? It's like, yeah, you can spend 6 hours doing that when you're a kid and never get bored of it.
That would be, if I was in the mansion, that's something I would be doing.
Yeah, you'd kill it.
I'd be riding around.
You'd break his fucking records. He'd hear dust. It's also funny, like, I mean, it was a thing, and I should mention, only 90s kids will understand this, but watching this movie for the first time when I was in high school or whatever and going like, oh, the opening to Bobby's World is a reference to this? That's weird.
It's because is Bobby on a big wheel in Bobby's World?
The opening credits of Bobby's World are Bobby on a big wheel running through his like family home and everyone like jumping out of the way.
Right.
And it so clearly has to be an homage to this, but you're like, that's a pretty cursed thing to put in the middle of your cartoon about a little boy with a big imagination.
Yeah, he's on the big wheel. There he goes.
He's on the big wheel.
Howie's fucking weird.
I don't know how he does it.
Yeah, how we do it.
I don't know how he do it.
What are some things in The Shining we haven't discussed yet?
We did
I
discuss
give a
bear
little bit of a
blowjob.
shout out to the costumer, because at one point they go straight from, there's that one shot of Jack Nicholson in the green turtleneck where he's just kind of staring blankly out the window, and it's like the moment where it's like, all right, so he's gone crazy. It's happened. They cut right from that to that yellow coat that she wears, and it's such a fucking amazing coat.
Oh my
It's
god.
such an amazing coat. So I want to throw out those two specific costuming choices are just great.
Dude, that whole fit, like I wrote that down too.
And the-
It's like a
fit.
yellow chore coat with like this beautiful embroidery on
Yeah.
it, and then she's wearing like very now hip, straight kind of like denim jeans with like moccasins. That is like, yeah, one of the best
The
looks.
fact that you're like Shelley Duvall fit watch right there.
Oh yeah,
It's
I
also
mean, Jack's got some cardigans too.
I was gonna say it's one of those movies where at least the three Torrance characters, anyone who walked into a bar in Bushwick wearing any outfit they wear in this movie would be the coolest person at the bar.
Even Danny.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm saying
Danny's
even
got
Danny,
Danny.
Danny's got some
overalls,
fits.
yeah.
right?
The
But
overalls are
all
good.
three of them, like all
the space sweater, love that thing.
I was good, and all the weird Shelley Duvall like sweaters. I'm just like all of these. You just be like, where did you find that?
I want to throw out one shot that I made a note of without revealing too much about myself, but feeling very comfortable with you all, that there is a great moment
Okay.
where and it sort of has to do with like I like how the titles of the timing become more and more frenetic, because it
Yeah.
starts out like, the interview, and then 1 month later, and then all of a sudden
And
it's like
8 a.m.
8 a.m.,
Yeah,
2 p.m., whatever.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
so at one point when it's like a 1 month later, she's bringing breakfast up to Jack in the
big old room. Yeah.
and he's like slept until 11:30, and just immediately you're like, oh fuck, depressed dad.
Right.
Yeah,
Immediately.
Yeah.
And there is a moment later on where Danny has to go up and get something out of the room, and she's like, just don't wake up your dad, he was up late. And there is just this Danny comes into the room, and you can see Jack in the reflection of the mirror, and he has this sort of nice scene with Danny. And there was something that I liked about the mirror being there, in that he's only seeing who he is. Jack is only seeing who he is in that moment, and sort of what he's become, is because his son is the mirror. Like, only by looking at his
Right.
son does he realize who he is and who he's become, and it
Yeah.
kind of leads to a nice moment between them.
Right.
And I just wanted to throw that out. That was just something like the fact that there is a literal mirror there, and then the sort of metaphoric, figurative mirror of the child there. I don't know. I liked that.
yeah, that's good.
I love that.
I don't know how it would fit into like, I think you should leave, but
I like that shot where Jack Nicholson's looking out the window and the camera just kind of looks at him, and you're like, oh, this guy's going crazy.
yes,
That shot's
Yeah,
pretty
I think
cool.
that's the green turtleneck shot.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is.
It's just
thinking of some crazy shots.
I mean, Jack Nicholson's face is just designed for the Kubrick stare.
It is.
As much as he had all of his actors do that, pretty much, it's like he's just got the right dimensions, that forehead, those eyebrows.
The way his hair is in
Yeah.
this movie. Kind of, looks kind of animalistic slightly. He writes this book, but it's all just the same word over and over again. Terrible book.
Terrible.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to say the poor fucking PAs
yes.
that
Having to write all
must
that
have
shit.
spent
Yeah.
fucking hours, because Kubrick is such a psycho.
Yeah, and they were like, can we
That he-
Xerox it? And he's like, no.
The spacing's wrong.
And it's also like, whatever, it's a stack of 50.
Yeah.
Let's say a stack of 200.
Yeah.
It's not like he asked them to do 200
Right,
pages,
just-
but 100, if not 150.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
And like, she's going through them, and
Right.
they did 50 takes, and,
And the
some of
different-
those
the
pages,
different
like, you can't
pages.
Every
have
one of them needs to be real.
They kind of look
Yeah.
crumpled. You
Right
can't
now,
reuse
they need to be
them.
clean. Right.
Oh my god.
They're probably worth thousands
God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
typed up
Yeah.
manually by hand.
Do you think it was manual though? Well, because they look different, so they have to.
Yeah.
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 Here's
Yeah.
one thing that I'll say about, and it's, I don't want to be psychologically manipulated, so I'm not asking for this.
Mhm.
But as like this, there was one director that I worked with who I loved working with, but was one of those people that like did a bunch of
Mhm.
takes, and you do kind of disassociate.
Yeah.
But what it does is allows, like, you almost blow something up so completely it doesn't make sense anymore, and then it can become something else.
That's the way Fincher talks about it. That his whole thing is like, it's not psychological manipulation. I'm very direct about what it is. I like getting to the point where you know the line so well,
Yeah.
and you've gotten out of your system any preconceived notions you had of how you would play this scene. The intent of the scene is bone deep, and now suddenly you're free to just like play it any way that comes to you in the moment.
And I do kind of enjoy that, but in the same way that like it must suck for the PAs to type that many things.
Yes.
I want to balance this by saying like nobody should have to work 20 hours a day. On
No one has to
set.
suffer.
Like nobody should have to suffer for all of it. But there is a reason, there is a point at which something becomes good because you put that much work into it.
Yeah.
The Shining is incredible, and they did 70 takes for each thing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
The Shining is beyond incredible. It is like
Yes.
a landmark work of its medium or
Yes.
whatever. Like they will always be remembered forever and ever and copied and thought about. Or, it's like beyond what
You're like, it'll be remembered forever. And it's, it's
Well, I
this
just mean,
landmark
like,
film.
it is beyond whatever masterpiece level you want to reach.
Sure.
It's on some higher echelon where
Yeah.
it's like, no, you've made like a thing that's just etched into the collective memory. That's hard.
But
it's like
it
The
is
Shining and
Yeah.
Assassin's Creed. and-
Right.
Church,
The top tier. It's what's
Wreck-It
so
Ralph.
difficult about
Wreck-It
Kubrick, though, where you're
Ralph.
like, you have so many people who try to follow his example, misunderstand,
Mhm.
are not able to execute the same level as him. Like they're taking the wrong lessons from him for the wrong reasons and applying them incorrectly, and then justifying the sort of difficulties that they put people through as like, well, this is what Kubrick did.
Right.
I'm like Kubrick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're not.
No,
Here's the thing. Boy, howdy, you are not like Kubrick.
you are not. You're not. And like, we'll devote an entire episode to this on Patreon, but it's one of those things that I appreciate so greatly about Dr. Sleep, where I'm like, as opposed to a lot of guys who self-style themselves as like, well, I'm a Kubrickian filmmaker, I feel like that is not Flanagan's default mode or style. I think when he needs to, he replicates the Kubrick style incredibly well in that movie without it
Right.
feeling like forced pastiche. Like it actually feels like a direct
100%.
invocation of the
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah,
And also,
yeah.
all stories you hear about him are like super chill, collaborative, low-key guy. That he
And what-
didn't feel like I have to Kubrick the shit.
We'll talk about that movie, but
We will.
it's also crazy how it has to thread paying some homage to Kubrick, but
Yeah.
then also like being a sequel to a book that is like, I hate the movie The Shining. Like, like Stephen King's like, I'm going to write a movie, a sequel to The Shining, and boy, do I not bring up that fucking
That's where
movie.
I go, like, you almost just have to automatically give that movie a masterpiece
Well, but
stamp
that's
just
the-
for doing both things
but
at the
that's
same
also
time.
when it came out, why I think everyone was like, what?
What
Like,
is this?
how do I deal with this?
Right.
You cast someone else as Jack Nicholson, but it looks like Jack Nicholson. Like, what is this? Like,
Yeah.
anyway, we'll talk about it later. What do you guys think about the scene where he goes into room 237? He sees a naked lady and she's all sexy, but then she looks scared.
Well, but even, you talk about the fucking Kubrick thing, it's like, the strings are swelling, her walk is too slow.
Mhm.
I'm never turned on by this.
You're
This
not
is the
turned on?
least I've ever liked seeing a naked
I
lady
say
on screen.
hachi machi.
No, see, I don't, because I'm just, it's the weird Shining rhythms where it's like, this feels wrong.
It feels wrong. And also, again, I've got the movie queued up. I'm just looking at
See,
scenes
when
right
you
now.
show me a still image like that, I'm like, oh yeah, boobs, love them. When I'm watching the movie,
I was trying to say, well, I mean, I think you're right, but it's the framing of it where you're like, you almost feel like he's in like a death chamber or something. Like,
Yeah.
there's just something really frightening about the symmetry of it.
but also her walk is so fucking slow. You're like, what's
If I walk
wrong?
into a hotel room that's abandoned,
Yeah.
and I see a naked lady, I'll tell you what I'd do.
What?
Walk slowly towards her and give her a kiss.
David,
You just give her a little.
Good behavior, right?
David,
just
you're
give her
a
a
man.
little peck.
That's true, but no, I
little
don't
peck
mean
on the
like I'm like I might be like, one, there's also the impulse to be like, oh, I'm sorry, and leave, but also two, like the
Yeah.
no one's in this hotel. You're a ghost,
Right.
Goodbye.
and then she like very quickly turns into Henrietta from Evil Dead 2.
Yeah, and she's like, eh.
Another thing about that scene is that my memory of it
Yeah.
is that they went to the room 5 times.
Yeah.
And we saw that naked lady 8 times. And the old, scary, crazy woman that she becomes is kind of always around.
It's the same thing. There's so much less of the twins than you remember there being.
Yes.
There's so
And
much
also-
less of everything.
And not
Yes.
only that, they don't matter. Obviously, they
Right.
they matter, but it's not like at the end, Jax has to fight the twins and the lady and meet them all again, or they all come together, and it's like, and here's what happened here. It's like,
Yeah.
no, just a crazy hotel filled with ghosts.
Right.
All kinds of shit happened here.
You know what has no bearing on the movie? A bunch of blood coming out of the elevators.
Oh, that's
It's
Yeah.
just
good too.
fucking scary.
Right.
No, that's actually It's a thing that happened. A bunch of blood checked into the hotel and lived
Yeah.
there for a while. It's just actually
There was a blood
referencing it.
convention.
Yeah, right,
It had lost its key and
Yeah,
had gone
it's
all
like-
the way up to the room.
It's like
and
it's
was really
spirited away
annoying.
when like a river shows up. They're
Yeah.
like, oh fuck, this year the blood is
Right.
coming. This
They
is
were
gonna be a
trying-
nightmare.
They were trying to get to room 24AB, conference room 24AB,
Yeah, like,
which is
Can we
the guest speaker.
Can we have him knock? His money's good, okay? The blood guy pays.
It's blood money.
Well, sure.
Yeah, I mean, what
got
else do
me
you expect
there.
them to have?
I hope you're wearing red pants. You're gonna hide all that blood money in your
They
pockets.
only did 3 shots of the blood. That is one of those things where everyone's like, that's one of the ones where Kubrick didn't actually fuck
He showed
us.
a little compassion to the blood where he's like, it might be tough for them to do multiple takes.
Here's one thing that I'll say. I wish they had bolted down that one chair.
Oh, that moves around. You don't
Yes.
like
Oh,
it?
sure.
Okay. all right.
I think that it was like
I kind of like it just because it makes it feel natural and so, or mistaken. I don't know. I like that.
okay.
I like that it breaks the Kubrick like everything
Control. Yeah.
like totally control.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I
just wanted to throw
I
that.
know. I know what you mean. That every time you watch the shot, you're like, it's funny that the chair moves.
Yeah, what-
Ben, what do you want to
that-
say?
We're talking about some dang ghosts, right? We're
Yeah.
framing it. It's like, this is just a story about ghosts in a hotel. And I think we need to shout out too, or just mention that the hotel in itself is kind of a character, kind of alive.
Yes.
So you're saying
Go on.
the hotel is a character in the movie, kind of like New York is a character in Sex and the
That's
City or
what I'm
whatever.
kinda saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
yeah. Should have been the billing Nicholson Duvall Hotel.
Hotel. Hotel played by Hotel.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the vibe of Doctor Sleep. Like at the end, the third act, they're like, and you missed him. He's here. What's it's what the Timberline Lodge, correct? Is the
Yeah.
yes, which is in Oregon. It's just the outside.
That's
Obviously,
the
all the
exterior,
inside is
right.
just sets, and it's mostly based on the Ahwahnee Hotel
Yeah.
in Yosemite. Yeah, it's also just something about the hotel where it doesn't feel congruous. Like there's like a massive gold room. And then there's like the big lobby that feels a little more like Native American and has like kind of like a totally different aesthetic. And then like the bathroom is all red and white and it looks like
Yeah.
a futuristic bathroom in a way. Like every room feels a little, which I love. Like,
Well, it is that weird thing. Like most movies, you hear about like, oh, the exterior was one place. This was shot in a set. This was shot here. Like the rooms are piecemeal constructed from different places. If it's an office building, if it's a home, whatever it is, right? Where you're like, oh, Roald Tannenbaum's. Each of those rooms was somewhere in an entirely different part of town because he found this bedroom looks right,
Right,
but
sure,
it's in a
sure,
different
sure.
building or whatever. And usually, magic of movies, you accept it all in your head. It all threads together. And this is almost like making the most out of like, no, these things wouldn't fit together. The transitions between room to room, hallway to hallway, or whatever. It's like there's too much going on in each individual space. And it's hard to place them all as part of one continuous structure in your head.
there's a teddy bear blowjob happening. In
There is a
one of
teddy bear blowjob. We haven't talked about that enough.
How do we feel about all those ghosts at the end?
them. Fucking love it.
Wait, was that always in the original movie?
yeah.
All of those
Yeah.
were?
Yeah.
Really?
It was something that I had weirdly erased
Wait,
from my. I
you don't remember
completely
Teddy Bear
forgotten
Blowjob?
about. All
I don't remember
But
the
it's-
head wound guy.
The guy's like, the thing about
Oh
him
yeah,
that's
that guy's
the
scary.
thing about him that's interesting is that it's Wendy who sees him. And of
Yeah.
course, like Jack is obviously the one who's mostly seeing all this stuff.
Mhm.
And so when Wendy sees him, you do have this sense of like it's all kind of bleeding out right now. Like they're all coming out because like shit's going down.
Yeah.
And Scatman's dead. Maybe Scatman dying. They're like, all right.
All right.
but
on.
like Wendy sees him, it's weird. And he's just
Yeah.
like, "Ugh," which I love. Love that guy.
She sees all of those ghosts. at the
Eventually,
end.
yeah, right. Like it's just like she only right at the end is she starting to see him too. I feel like, right?
But to Ben's point,
Skeletons in the cobweb is like fucking Are You Afraid of the Dark? a
I
little bit.
wasn't. I will. I like. You're looking at me for backup, and I will back you up on this a little bit, Ben. I
Thank
think
you.
that maybe the skin. Who am I to say anything against Stanley
No,
Kubrick?
I kind of agree with you in that. Sorry, I'm not.
I
You-
think
no, but
those
you're speaking-
skeletons maybe are a little bit like we don't really have a lot of money left.
Who are
It's
you to
supposed be
say?
3 months. And
who are you to say? This is an expert opinion coming from the 10th build lead of Goosebumps. You have all the
Tim, are you in Goosebumps?
I am. I
Oh my
play.
God, I gotta
play
see
a
that movie.
cop.
right. You're one of
can't
the
remember-
cops who doesn't take anything seriously, right? Don't bother me with these Goosebumps kids.
don't,
I got coffee to
that
drink.
was one of my famous lines.
Yeah.
Was, "Don't bother me with these Goosebumps kids."
Yeah. Hey,
That
kids,
was
don't
one of
bother
the
me.
first
with these
times that I felt like kind of famous was
Oh,
when
wow.
one of the kids at my kid's daycare
Yeah.
was like, "Hey, are you in Goosebumps?" And I was like, "That movie's kind of spooky for somebody your age." And they were like, "Yeah, but I'm tough." And I was like, "All right."
Yeah, cool, fucking rad.
Did you-
You
did you-
won over the
Yeah.
toughest kid in your
Did you read all the Goosebumps?
children's preschool.
Did you read any Goosebumps? Did you,
Yeah, how
like-
deep did you go on research?
I was, I think, about a year too old for Goosebumps.
Mm.
Yes,
In the same way that I
perfect
was
age
like a
for
couple
Goosebumps.
years too young for 90210. I was
Oh,
a couple,
sure.
Yeah,
I was in that
No, I get it.
very weird.
You were like a teenager or whatever, and it was sort of like,
Yeah, it was like that's
too.
a little too young for me.
I was
but
like
yeah.
obsessed with Goosebumps.
Yeah.
God, were you?
Ah, are you kidding me?
God, I love Goosebumps.
But I think
Love
that's one of the
Goosebumps.
things that I brought to the production is that I
Oh,
just
of
didn't.
course.
I was kind of like the Scatman Crothers of the Goosebumps set. You know what I mean? Like
I
I
do.
wasn't there like paying homage to the
No.
old masters.
You're like, I'm here to do my own
I
work.
think the thing
was here
about
to
pave
do
my
my
own
own work.
legacy.
I'll say this. I love that she goes into the lobby and it's suddenly covered in cobwebs. Like
Uh-huh.
that's cool.
Mhm.
The skeletons, maybe it's the
Skellington.
only skeletons. It's the only like hat on a hat thing of like I was already creeped out,
Sure.
and this is almost out of the monsters or whatever. like
Yeah.
or what- it's not really, but like it's one of those images in The Shining that whenever I rewatch the movie, I'm like, oh right, skeleton room. Yeah, I forgot about that.
It's a
one.
little bit like the haunted houses that I would go to, like in a small town in Maine, when they'd be like, well, "What does this room have?" Ooh, some skeletons.
And then it's just one skeleton that heads turn.
it turns toward you.
Yeah.
To Ben's point, though, it just reminded me. He asked if the bear blowjob was always in the movie. The two notable sort of cuts of this film.
Yes, go on.
There was the original ending that he cut out pretty quickly, but that did screen originally, right? Where there was sort of the epilogue.
There's
with
like an explanation.
Wendy
scene,
and it's sort of the end of Psycho.
which I love the end of Psycho and I defend it, but I
Same.
think Kubrick was kind of correctly like they don't need
Wendy
this
and
at this
Danny in the
point.
hospital, and the
Right.
the guy.
The guy's
fucking-
like your husband froze to death or whatever.
but we
Yeah.
never found the body. How weird.
Right. Yeah.
And it was like, oh, don't explicitly get into did this happen or not shit. They were like, it's better to leave it all elusive.
There's also something around a scrapbook of photos that was
Mhm.
also something that was shot but got cut out. Is you see it in the final cut still on his
Sure.
desk.
Yes.
It's a photo album that he discovers sort of midway into the movie that shows a picture of him. That shows that picture
Right,
of him.
right,
Oh,
right.
yes.
right.
It's in the book, but yeah, they whatever. I think Kubrick kept erring on the side of like no explanation.
Yeah.
Like the less the better. Like it has to be for so long because he's basically like until the meat locker door opens and he comes out, you can still be like this is all in his head.
Right.
Yeah.
That's when you have to be like, well, okay, like
Yeah.
something supernatural opened that door.
Yeah.
But he loves that.
And David wouldn't understand this, but the other thing is, in the UK, the movie was not playing well, and Kubrick himself cut 30
He
minutes.
cut it like
out of
way
it.
down. He cut it to like 2 hours.
And
It's
some
like a
people
2.5 hour
prefer
movie.
that cut,
Yeah,
which I've never seen.
not me. never
But it
seen
is an interesting. It was like he himself at the same time was like, "Well, I want the movie to play well." You know, it wasn't like a sort of forced studio concession, and he just has a cut that just like gets to the point faster. That some people swear by.
Ready Player One. They go to the hotel. They have a fun sequence in there.
Yeah, that's bizarre.
I really love that sequence.
One of these days, you now forced me to fucking rewatch this movie at some point.
Huge fan of that movie. And obviously Kubrick and Spielberg very close. And
Sure.
he's like, eh. They're doing a TV show called Overlook.
Oh yeah,
Maybe that'll never happen, but like one of those like classic HBO announces like Hotel Origins, get pumped, 10 episodes,
is Mark
1 hour
Romanek,
a plot.
is Mark
somehow
Romanek
12
doing it, or was he previously attached to do some version?
Mark Romanek? Is
Yeah.
that who you said?
who so badly wants
No,
to be Kubrick.
it's like a doomed product. It's like one of
Right.
his many like
Right,
it was going to be called the Overlook Hotel.
right. This is
Does
now a
sound
different
kind of
thing.
cool, but
What's the name of Scatman's character again?
Scatman's character in The Shining,
Yes,
the character that he plays,
yes.
Oh, Holleran.
Dick Halloran.
That's the other thing. When they were making Doctor Sleep and they were so bullish on like this is going to be a fucking blockbuster, they had Flanagan write a Holleran movie
Oh, Jesus.
because they were like fucking Shining expanded universe. Let's do all of this. And then the second the movie bombed, they were like shelf. But another thing that's probably better left unsaid. I mean, I feel like it always, anytime they would sort of talk about doing any Shining follow-up, it was like, hubris, don't do it, you're gonna fail. And Dr. Sleep does it so well.
It does it so well.
And bombed and was only sort of half well received when it came out, where I'm like, don't do it. You're never going to do it better than this, and this didn't even work.
See, I though think
at the time.
I think that all work and no play make John, like, that would be a really great movie. Do you know what I mean?
just adapt the book.
Yeah, yeah. Come on.
Just take that.
Yeah.
Straight from the source.
Hollywood announces IP, great IP. It's in the movie.
Yeah. Shawn Anders.
Everyone loves the movie.
It's a family
It's like
comedy.
A family comedy, right?
Yeah. Right.
What do you guys make of the closing shot where Jack Nicholson's in the picture, but it's from a long ago? I'm just trying to do the thing where I like reference moments in The Shining that are famous now.
It's funny that people like talk about that being so elusive. And I still find like the ending of 2001 confusing and have a hard time even coming up with a thesis in my head that like tracks.
The ending of 2001 is just like, man, this shit's just gonna
Here's
keep on
some
going,
shit.
baby. No,
Right.
it's just like the ball keeps rolling.
Yeah.
What can I tell you?
Well, spoilers.
Yep.
For an episode we've already recorded.
Sure. Well,
By this point, even though we haven't in real life.
Yep.
The ending of this, I'm just like, oh, it's sort of like that's where everyone's cursed to.
Yeah.
It's
right.
not
He's
like,
trapped.
oh, he was literally there before.
No, I think he was
view it as,
literally
like,
there before.
That's what's weird about Kubrick's rejection of the idea of hell or whatever,
Mm.
where I'm just like, that night is weirdly the frozen in time night that repeats itself in a continuum in this hotel. It's the cursed night. And if you become a victim to this hotel, you're like stuck there. Right? That's how I take it.
I that's how I take it too. But maybe he was at the July 4th ball in 1921 or whatever.
Maybe he's a time traveler.
I mean, obviously, it's that.
Maybe he's a
shot.
quantum leaper.
Oh, I read something that was
No, he can't be
actually
a
about
quantum
this.
leaper because in the picture he would appear as the person that he left
You're right.
into. So
Yeah, so quantum,
that
quantum leap
theory's
logic
fucking
does
stupid.
not
Yeah.
apply. Just trying to think of anything else. Did I mention the little girls who say, "Come play with me"?
Creepy.
Big wheel.
Mhm.
Come
Blood-
on, is there anything
Blood,
else?
blood elevator.
It's just funny. Red rum.
Red rum.
we talked about Red Rum.
Crash zooms are just always so effective with that fucking Wendy Carlos music. It's so scary.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, Wendy Carlos rules.
You know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a good movie. It's one of my favorite movies ever. I watch it all the time. If I'm ever like on vacation in like the winter in like Vermont, like if I'm in some kind of cozy lodge,
Sure.
which one of my best friends has a little ski house and like a little ski lodge in Vermont.
Humble brag.
I mean, it's very humble. So yes,
The humblest of brags.
we always are like 6 hours into getting there. We're like, all right, let's
Really?
throw on The Shining. Oh,
That's like when I least want to watch The Shining. I
oh,
feel.
I want to
Yeah.
watch it. Although I will say, I mean, he's always been a big Shining, but he's not a, whatever, cinephile or whatever. And then one time he was like, Kubrick, I've seen X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
And I was like, have you ever seen Barry Lyndon? He was like, no. And I was like, I'm putting it on. And like 10 minutes, and he was like, what the fuck is this? And then I was like, don't worry. And we watched it. And then like he watched it like 10 more times.
Yeah.
And that was just a nice memory.
Oh.
He just kept texting me being like, I can't stop watching that movie. I'm like, that's a movie.
Have you guys done 2001 yet?
No. Record
no,
order.
I mean, I
we've
did
been
it.
Jumping around.
I did it about 21 years ago. I had a good time. I was
Oh,
15
boy.
years old.
Yeah.
Can't remember.
Yeah. I saw Shrek 4 times.
Yeah, right. Lord of the Rings came
theaters.
out
Yeah.
that year.
Right.
I was a sophomore.
Oops, I did it again.
Oops, I did it again. Is that 2001?
Yeah. Right. Because Hit Me Baby One More Time's 99.
Oops, I did it again is 2000.
Fuck.
Flat on your face.
Fuck.
Yeah,
Lucky
Yeah, Lucky. Or I'm a Slave for You. I'm a
Okay.
Slave for You.
is 01.
Is 01.
I would have bet any
That's
amount of
how
money that was
quick it is.
2 or 3.
It's
yeah.
Baby One More Time 99. Oops 2000. Brittany, which is the one with I'm a Slave
Right.
for You, which is kind of like a relaunch,
is
2001. It was that brief.
right. Because In the
They really-
Zone is
In the
2
Zone
or
is
3.
03.
Right.
She took a break.
Yeah.
Her greatest hits are 04. She's been a pop singer for 5 years.
It's incredible.
All right. So quickly, I'll just share this is an Entertainment Weekly article with Johnson, the producer and writer, is quoted.
Diane Johnson.
There is an explanation for the photo, though it's a bit strange and paradoxical because it's both real and unreal. The idea that Jack was always at the hotel in some earlier incarnation. Jack had somehow been the creature of the hotel through reincarnation.
Right. It's like there's always going to be but that to me is just, that's the poetry of it. It's like there'll always be some fucking person being tortured by this place. Right.
Right.
Like he's Grady, but he's also not Grady.
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah.
And like that's why I like that Grady, when you're like, you imagine a most feral guy because you hear like, oh my God, he like chopped up his kids and shot
Right.
himself. And then he's like a posh butler type.
Yeah.
Like, that's cool. That's
Yeah.
creepy.
Yeah.
I don't know. Good movie. B+.
Yeah. I think good. Yeah. Good
Two out
movie.
of 2 knives out of 10. I already gave my grade.
Good, scary movie. Yeah.
No, I love it. I feel like you don't love it as much as I do. I feel like
Um,
you've never been a Shining.
No,
guy.
I mean, I'm less of a Kubrick.
You're more of a Shining Time station.
Well, yeah, that's my vibe.
I mean,
But I feel like I'm less of a Kubrick guy than most, but this is at the very top tier for me, even still. I think I like this movie a hell of a lot. I think I didn't realize how much you loved it, the scale at which you loved it.
it's one of my faves.
Yeah. No, but I'm a big ass fan of this movie. This is near the top for me.
All right, you want to do the box office game? Tim, is there anything else in your notes? Come on, we're winding down. It's been a long.
Just run down a couple.
Please,
Just
Because you brought your laptop. I mean, you flew in to do this podcast and to go golfing.
on your laptop.
and brought
That's
your
on my
laptop in so you could consult your notes.
Oh yeah, absolutely, guys.
Yeah.
I'm a
Hey.
guest here. I wanted to be a good guest in your home, in
Hey.
Ben's home.
Ben's
It's been
home.
amazing.
The
yeah.
axe was a bit intense, but it's fine. We don't need
Look,
to
an
talk
actor
about
prepares.
it more.
Don't question
You're
Tim's
right.
method. Whatever it takes to
Okay.
get there.
All right.
I have to do whatever it takes me to get there.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a dainty job, and I need to.
It's justified.
It's justified. All
All's
right.
fair in art.
So
There are no crimes in art.
I would say that there are like a couple things just going along with what I was really noticing was that sort of like the domestic violence thing
Mhm.
is the Jack's manipulation, especially when he's in the freezer or in the dry goods
When he's
storage or
saying
whatever.
like, you really hurt me. Like,
really hurt me. It's just like that.
Yeah.
It does a really good job of like he tries all the tricks to get like that sort of tracks with that thing, and also the fact that even as he's coming at her with like she's
gonna
like I
bash
just want to
your
go back
brains.
to my room. I
Yeah.
just want to go back to my like she's like I just want to think a little while, whatever that is. Like she is still trying to make it all
It's a
okay.
reason with
And
him,
the
yeah.
only reason that he gets hit in the head with the bat is because she kind of accidentally brushes his hand with the bat.
Right.
Mm.
You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not like I'm going to take this moment to take control of this. It's oh, fuck, I hit him a little bit, which means now he's going to kill me unless I do this.
Right.
And I just thought that part of it was incredible.
She rarely directly attacks him. When she hits him with a knife later, that's a mistake too, basically. She's just kind of like flailing with it. She
Yeah.
mostly just wants to get away from him. They kill him by running away from him.
Yeah.
He dies in the maze. Like, it's like, again, we could put Snow on trial,
We could.
but I don't think she killed
We
him.
could and we should.
Yeah. we should.
And also like that cut to him being frozen, incredible. I think that was generally all the stuff that I have from my notes.
Yeah, that cut, I forgot how quickly they go from like him sort of like lurching through the maze to just hard cut.
He froze.
Yeah.
The Simpsons, that is the only problem. I had seen that episode like 50 times before.
I
saw
feel like
The
I'd seen so many parodies of
But
different elements of this. The Simpsons one is,
so good.
yeah, it's
But one
All
thing
work
that
and
I
no play
love
makes Homer something something. Go crazy. Don't mind if I do. Just always gets me. It's so fucking funny.
one thing that I love about movies like this is
Yeah.
that no matter how many times they've been parodied, no matter
Yeah.
how many times they've been
You
aped,
can't hurt it.
the power is
Bullet
rarely
Ken,
still there.
No
Even
matter how
the-
many times they tried to make a sequel, like
Yeah.
100% bullet.
no matter how many times some asshole comes on a podcast and says this is just like Tim Robinson,
Yeah.
it will never put a dent in how good and scary that movie is from the first moment to the very end.
And the bones are their money. David,
Bones are their money.
the bones are their money.
Man, if you found a big old skeleton room, you'd be rich.
David.
Yes.
I was not trying to look up box office stuff.
Oh, sure.
But I did just see that like most of the Kubrick movies were kind of platformed, that they were like, well, this is this heady filmmaker. You have to build like slowly
Mm.
the interest in this film. This movie was like 10 theaters opening weekend and then like 1,000. Like they were like, this is a commercial.
This
play.
played more as, of course, it was famously nominated for 2 Razzies and got like mixed-ish reviews at the time.
I feel like the Harvard Lampoon also like dubbed this the worst movie of the year. Like a lot of people thought they were smarter than this film.
people never behave that way. What are you talking about?
I just real quick, one more thing.
Yeah.
We've been going a long time. I'm very
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
No, what
In
is it?
that scene right before she hits him with the bat, he's gone crazy. Danny's been strangled by a ghost, and she says, "I want to talk to you," and he says, "What do you want to talk about?"
It's
Which
so
is
funny.
so funny
Yeah.
It is
and
funny.
so scary.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's it.
The thing I think you're trying to reference, Griff, is this movie came out platform against the wide release of another very famous movie.
Empire
The
Strikes
most
Back.
successful movie of the year,
Right,
The Empire
right.
Strikes Back.
Which I was surprised that this was a like Memorial Day weekend
Correct. That's exactly when it is. Right.
release.
End of
I
May.
just would have assumed this movie came out in the fall or winter.
You would think you'd want to put this out in the winter. It's set in the winter.
Yeah.
Famously. Empire Strikes Back, also a snowy movie, but no,
True,
it's for
true.
people, fanning themselves.
It was
They
a
wanna
very-
go to a cool air
Very
conditioned.
snowy May at the cinemas that year.
So number 1 is The Empire Strikes Back.
Mhm.
New this week.
Okay.
Luke, I Am Your Father.
Yep.
Spoiler alert.
Uh-huh.
Number 2 is a horror film.
Why they? And I just it didn't say in the episode description it would have spoilers for Empire Strikes Back.
Well, sorry.
I wouldn't have
Okay.
listened to the episode if I knew they were just gonna spoil other movies. Okay.
Is Truman Capote listening to
Yeah.
our show?
I don't know. I found the film distasteful.
Number 2 is a
I
horror
cut open
film.
a tauntaun.
We
I would
actually
never do such a thing.
mentioned this, this franchise at the top. Slasher film.
Is it the first Friday the
Sure
13th?
is.
Wow.
First Friday the
Weird
13th.
to think about them like
Isn't that crazy?
coexisting
That's
theaters at the same
insane.
time.
So
Yeah.
two very different,
Yeah.
things right alongside each other. They're Shining.
These two movies, Friday the 13th and The Shining, opened up the same week,
No.
or they were just playing.
Friday the
at the same
13th had opened maybe 2 weeks ago or whatever. Like it's been around. Empire and Shining are new this week.
Wow.
Friday the 13th just opened. And you could bounce from, Star Wars over to
But
Jason
one of those
over to The
things where
Shining,
you're like,
you know?
those movies can't coexist. One of them must have flopped. How could audiences want both of them at the same time? It's bizarre. That's like, no, both of these worked.
This was a very, solid hit.
opposite ends of
This
the
is
spectrum.
like, one of the true hits of Kubrick's career.
Yeah.
Obviously, like Spartacus is the biggest, but
Yeah,
like,
but this was a big ass hit.
and 2001, but like
Yeah.
this is big. Shining opening limited, number 3.
Mhm.
Number 4 is a movie I've never heard of. I'm gonna have to look it up. Let's see.
1980.
no.
Dave's never heard of it.
I've never heard of it. It's a teen comedy
Okay.
depicting crass and mischievous antics,
Screwballs?
practical jokes, a 1950s era car club. This looks like a kind of American Graffiti knockoff.
Mischief?
Sorry?
Mischief?
Is there mischief in the movie?
I'm throwing out titles of movies I know that are like
Oh,
this.
It's not mischief.
okay.
I will say this film stars an actor who you know personally.
who I know Tim Simons?
No.
Actor who I know. Oh. Is it the Jackie Earl Haley?
Nope.
No, fuck.
Okay, when I say you know him personally, I mean you've watched a lot of his television show with him on the internet.
What?
How many people have you done that with? How many people have you live streamed watching their TV show with them? giving
Robert
comments?
Wool's in it.
Robert
Is it
Wool.
Hollywood Nights?
It's the Hollywood Nights.
Yeah.
Robert Wool, Tony Danza, Michelle Pfeiffer,
Yeah.
Fran Drescher,
His character's name in that movie is like Pangborn Krillhorn or some shit.
U-Bomb Turk.
Yeah, it's
What
one
kind
of
of fucking name is that?
it's one of the great movie character names. That was like an Animal House runoff, where
But
he
it's like
plays.
set in the 50s.
Yes.
So I guess it's got like
Well, Animal House is set in the 60s.
actually this is also set in the 60s. So there you go.
Yeah.
So total Animal House.
But yeah, Robert Wool's playing like the Bluto type character.
Right.
You know, it's
Um,
incredibly weird. Never met Robert Wool.
Right. You've only that's why I did have to correct where I'm like,
Right.
look, you're not like Jackie Earl Haley type friends where you actually
No.
work together. But
No, I thought it was Losing It, maybe, which Jack
Sure.
Haley is in. Yeah. Okay. Anyway,
Number 4 at the box office is the Hollywood Nights. Number 5 at the box office is the film version of a sort of cult TV show of the moment.
so it's a continuation of the show having been on air, or is it much later?
It's
Is it the Nude Bomb?
No, sorry. The show had just gone off the air.
Okay.
But it's like not a narrative show. It's like a variety show. This is one of the famously awful movie.
It's the Gong Show movie.
The Gong Show movie.
Yeah. Okay.
Chuck Barris's The Gong Show movie, which was like
The Gong Show movie?
I think it was like
remember how you used to watch the Gong Show and you go, I wish this thing had more plot. I wish there was a real strong narrative backbone to this thing.
was one of those things where it was like taken out of theaters immediately. Basically, it was so bad.
Is it the plot that's like a mystery happening on the set of the Gong Show or whatever?
I don't know. Sounds bad to me.
How did he get the paper bag on his head?
That's the question.
You've also got
It's an unknown
Walter,
comic
a
origin.
Walter Hill Western called The Long Riders. I feel like we've mentioned this one before. It's
Yeah.
got all 3 Carradines in it.
Right. Isn't
David,
that the one
Keith,
that
and Robert.
has like, but then it also has like both Quaids.
It has
and-
both Quaids, both guests,
Yes.
Christopher and Nicholas, and both Keaches.
Right.
James
It's
and
the brothers
Stacy.
movie.
Sounds stupid, but I don't know. I kind of want to check it out because of Walter Hill. You've got Tom Horn. What is that?
No idea.
That is another Western, a Steve McQueen, old Steve McQueen.
Wow.
Like late in life. He probably died just a couple of years out. He died that year. Died in
Wow.
1980.
Wow.
You've got The Nude Bomb, which is that's the Get Smart
I
movie,
fucking
right?
just guessed it.
You just guessed it. Like earlier, you mean?
I guessed it for number 5 when you said it was a
Yeah,
TV.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Nude Bomb. I feel like it came. We must have done a movie around here recently because I feel like we talked about The Nude Bomb, didn't we?
I'm always talking about the new film.
Have you seen The Nude Bomb? Because The Nude Bomb is like 10 years later, right?
Yeah.
New bomb?
It's the nude bomb.
It's the Get Smart movie, but it's Get Smart ends.
It was
in,
like 12 years after the
1970 or
show
whatever.
had gone off the
No.
air, and it was a
No.
huge bomb. And Hollywood's takeaway was like, never put the word bomb in the title.
Yeah,
That means
right.
the movie will bomb. Truly, that was their.
Well, or at least like the fucking press will leap at it. Like
Yeah.
they'll put it on all their headlines. Number 9 is All That Jazz. Maybe that's when the Nude Bomb came.
Oh, sure.
Right. And then number 10 is Coal Miner's Daughter, which I also feel like we mentioned on that
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah.
That episode had Lin-Manuel Miranda on it.
Yeah. Is that pretty wild?
Pretty cool.
Though this whole time I've just been thinking that
This episode
if
we've had
I
some
can't
fucking
imagine
bomb.
you at the breakfast table with your father, the box office game hits different.
Oh, sure.
You know what I
well,
mean?
that's
Like
what you
it
have-
lacks some
Interesting. If-
emotion.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I can't
very
imagine you
different.
really trying to guess with your dad. David's a stand-in for your
No.
father.
Yeah, in many
Peter.
ways. Absolutely. No, because it is with things like this, I'm like, what are other movies we've covered from this year? When I've
Yeah.
looked at box office, it's like remembering triangulating
we-
versus.
What do we think of this Starship Troopers
I
Steel?
think it's pretty good.
pretty cool.
You see this, Tim?
Pretty
Oh,
cool.
that's sick.
I don't know.
So
think I'm
I
gonna
have
get
the
that.
previous Steel they put out for Starship Troopers that was sort of like the Nazi propaganda poster,
Right.
which I liked. And I'm looking at this and I'm questioning, are they going to get me to fucking
Do it. Or-
swap steels? Am I going to upgrade? Because it's not a new
The
edition.
thing is
There's
that
no.
anytime I do that now, I just give it to Emma Stefanski, who lives near me.
Yeah.
I'm always, every time I see her, I'm like, I got like 6 more DVDs that I have due.
Charitable
Just
act.
fucking
Yeah.
have.
I
it.
have
But she's like,
offered
sure.
this service to you guys. Just text me and I'll say, don't spend your money.
Well,
right,
you're
Ben wants to
offering
do
the
the
opposite
thing.
service.
Yeah,
You're
we don't
saying,
want to do that.
Don't buy the thing in the first
Don't
place.
Whereas
do it,
Emma
guys. You don't
gives-
need this.
Yeah.
Emma
stuff.
gives me the other thing, which is
Right.
like, sure, I'll take Interstellar off your hands.
Ben
if you're
wants us to
upgrading.
test-
Yeah.
To text him and say, should I upgrade to the new steel? And Ben will go, no, and you shouldn't have bought the last one either.
Right.
Go outside.
Yeah. You never should have bought an edition of this movie, period.
I'm so hungry.
I am too. We
Guys,
got to
we
get
did it.
sandwiches.
Yeah.
Tim,
I what a pleasure. Thank
So
you
long
so much for
overdue.
having me.
You
here.
got to come back.
I will absolutely.
In my
come
opinion,
back.
you have
in
to
my
come back.
opinion, IMO, I'm HO. You got to come back. You're the best in the best.
Thank you for having me. You guys are great.
Is there anything you want to plug? I know you've been doing the V podcast, right?
Yeah, no, I don't want to plug anything.
Great. Perfect.
Okay. Fine. Don't plug anything. You don't even want to plug Goosebumps? Come on.
Goosebumps.
Fun for the whole thing.
Yo, I would say I'll fucking plug. I'll plug. I don't know. Fucking Double Indemnity. I just watched Double Indemnity
Cool.
a couple nights ago. It's fucking
Cool.
great. Go watch that.
Can I just say, you do have such a fucking cool career. Like, I do think when I look at your filmography, you've been able to do such different stuff. Like, both in terms of you working with, like, very cool first-time filmmakers, having, like, small parts in, like, fucking Inherent Vice and shit. You know, like, you're building one of those, like, ideal random roles careers. You know, which is, like, my favorite kind of acting career, where it's just, like, different sizes, different projects, different genres, budget levels, working with really interesting different people.
I have come into a thing where like I all I want is to have anything that resembles the careers of people that I admire, which
Right,
are like
sure.
like when it comes down to it, I think Roy Schneider is sort of quickly becoming my favorite movie star.
Yeah.
And
Good answer.
and Steve Buscemi and like those guys. Like those are the guys that I've always loved.
Yeah.
And so I don't know anything that gets me close to anything
I think you're doing
that
it.
those guys do.
I think you're doing it.
All right. Well, thank you. You're very flattering.
Well, thank you for doing this podcast.
Yeah.
And thank you all for listening.
Yeah.
Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you to Marie Barty for our social media and helping to put the show together. Joe Bowen, Pat Reynolds for our artwork, AJ McKeon, Alex Barron for our editing, JJ Birch for our research. Go to blankcheckpod.com for links to some real nerdy shit, including our Patreon page where we're doing James Bond, Roger Moore commentaries. And we'll do the Dr. Sleep episode. Tune in next week for Full Metal Jacket, 7-year break in between movies.
Yeah, who's going to be the guest on that one?
I don't know. We have no idea.
Cool.
That's the end of this episode. And as always, I'm checking my notes here. I believe the coffee drop made the theatrical cut of Draft Day. I
have to tell you it did not, Griff. I'm so sorry. I'm double checking my notes here. It turns out the coffee drop did not make the final cut of Draft.
God damn it.
Theatrical.